Oh, there we are.
He's got the
Very
notification.
nice.
We're on
And
it.
there's the message.
Well. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and ladies. Welcome to another edition of the Virtual Cantina Watch Along. And a little bit of a change up tonight because, we just finished up Mandalorian Season 3 last week, and we got a little bit of a lull before Ahsoka comes in. And of course, we got big May the 4th next Thursday, which is absolutely fantastic. But we are going back to our Star Wars adjacent series, which we all love, involving actors and crewmen who have been involved in other properties within different franchises, etc. But first, let me introduce the crew for the evening, if you will. First and foremost, we have Swab the Decks, Dave O'Neill. How are you, sir?
Doing well this evening.
Excellent. And he's minding the wheel. So be steadfast
here.
with that. We have Walk the Plank, Jeff. How are you, Jeff?
Good. Ready for a nice long pirate movie.
Yes, indeed. And our resident governor pirate, Captain Johnny Notman. How are you, sir?
Good evening. I'm the captain now, but I'm a bit worried about the commodore over here. He kind of outranks me a little bit tonight.
I'm a vice admiral technically, even though it's not on seafaring. Different.
So before we introduce the Commodore right now, just want to say a couple of things. We are very excited that you all are joining us tonight on whether it be on our home fleet on the Facebook or on our extended fleet on the Virtual Cantina Network. And also stay tuned to the end of the movie tonight because we're going to have a very, very special announcement concerning our next design of our shirts that we do. So which we're very, very excited about that. But without further ado, Captain Notman, would you like to introduce the Commodore?
Yes, I will. Such a great pleasure to introduce what I consider now to be a great family member of the Virtual Cantina, and welcome again to Hal Hickel. Hal, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here. This should be fun. I haven't watched this fine film in a little too long, so it'll be nice to go take a stroll down memory lane and spill some tea about it, as the kids nowadays like to say. Nothing too
veritable tea party.
Yeah, exactly. Looking forward to it.
So first and foremost, I know we can't talk very much about it, but first and foremost, congratulations on season 3 Mandalorian.
Oh yeah.
Now, absolutely, love content, love where it's going. As you and I have chatted offline, I'm freaking out what season 4 is going to be like after that ending. So excited. Congratulations on finishing another season of Mandalorian.
Thanks very much. A lot of folks worked really hard on it. It took a lot of hard work to get it over the finish line, and I'm glad people are enjoying it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's phenomenal, and I think that it just opens up a whole slew of possibilities with almost like a reset, which is actually kind of cool in that capacity. So Dave, if people have questions for Hal about his involvement with this or any of his properties, where should people be putting their questions?
We are watching all the chats. We've got a chat live over here on the Facebook page, the Star Wars Celebration Japan now 2025,
Wow.
That Facebook page. And we're also over on the Virtual Cantina Network on YouTube. So you can comment in either place and we'll be able to read them and relay those to Hal and get your questions answered.
Excellent. Well, hello to everybody on both platforms. I can see on the Virtual Cantina Network, we got Melody, we got Christine, and our good friends over at Skywalking Through Neverland, who told me that they ran into you at the premiere.
Right.
Mando, which was very, very nice. very, very excited about this. So, Pirates of the Caribbean. Obviously, it's a long history of Disney taking a ride from Disneyland and making a film out of it. They've done that several times with other properties, including like Haunted Mansion, to name one. But this was a unique one because obviously it was one of the first rides over at the original Disneyland, and it was unique because we talked about before, it was the first time that a film really didn't have beginning credits. Prior, there was just a fade into the graphic. Incredible story, and it opened up the lore, which actually ended up changing the ride. It's funny how it says, like, art imitates life, and then life imitates art, and then goes from there. But Hal, tell us about how you came across in this particular franchise, moving into the sequel in this property.
Well, yeah, it was a long road. We, by the time we were making this film, we had made the first one, and there'd been a little gap between the two. Whereas when we made two and three concurrently. They were all the first unit shooting happened in one long go, and then post-production was kind of, there was a little break between 2 and 3, but not much, and it was kind of like making one long movie. But we made the first one already, and it was a great experience. I mean, I certainly, when I was asked at ILM, hey, we want to put you on this project, I was a little leery because it's based on a theme park ride, but at that point, Disney didn't have a big success rate with those kind of movies. They'd done Country Bear Jamboree, and maybe Haunted Mansion had come out before us. I don't remember, but they hadn't done a whole lot of them. And so it's kind of like, but in its favor, pirates aren't just a ride, they're a whole literary and film genre unto themselves. Prior to this, it was like, okay, well, there's that. But then on the other hand, there hadn't been a good pirate movie in decades. So it was like, oh, that's kind of worrying. But John Knoll was already on it at that point, and he and I had been really hoping to work together. We'd worked together sort of on the prequels, but not directly. I hadn't really worked on the sequences he was in charge of exactly. And so kind of worked around each other, but not directly. So John was the effects soup, and I thought, well, that's great. That makes me glad. And when I talked to John, he said, oh, you got to meet Gore. You're going to really like Gore. You're going to, again, this is on the first film. So we went down for meetings, and I saw the artwork, and Gore kind of, gave me his enthusiasm for the project, and I was sold. And then it worked out great. And Johnny was, obviously gave this singular performance that famously the movie execs were nervous about, but then it, is now iconic. And it's a lot of great lightning in a bottle kind of stuff. But then, of course, when you come to the second one, you start to worry, like, are we going to be able to recapture that magic? But the first thing Gore told John and I about the second one, and I think this was when we were at the VES Awards, Visual Effects Society, which is kind of our effects industry awards night. We were at that award show, and Gore came to support us, which was very nice of him. And he started telling us a little bit about what the next film might have in it. And he said, and all he told us was, he said, I want to do a Gollum-like character. And what he meant by that was because Gollum, obviously, in the Lord of the Rings films was a very recent thing, and people were very knocked out by having this like really hero close-up CG character, which Jar Jar had been, but this is in a more serious dramatic role. Gollum was, and Gore was like, I have a character in mind that can only be done that way, but I really, we want to take it up a notch, as people always say. But anyway, so that's the first thing we learned about it, and that was Davy Jones, of course. And so, and then the ball got rolling, and we got to work on our end in pre-production. We had a bunch of, I don't know, should we start? How much preamble do you want me to do before we start showing? I'm fine.
15 minutes, so plenty of time. Whatever stories you want to go into before we jump in, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to. There were some kind of R&D challenges that John and I agreed on that needed tackling. We knew that these characters were going to be wet. A lot of they're number one, they were going to have very complicated, and by characters I mean Davy and his crew. They're going to have very complicated costumes because they're sort of those layered piratey costumes, but they're shredded and encrusted with sea life, and they needed to be in different stages of wetness, from fully wet as they come up out of the surf to just sort of drippy wet when they're on the ship and it's storming, to dry in some scenes. So we knew that we needed to really up our game in terms of cloth simulation. It had been evolving ever since Phantom Menace at ILM. It was a tough problem to solve, and back in the early 2000s, it was still a difficult thing to do. But we knew we were going to have big challenges on this show, and so that was one. Another thing was on the first Pirates, we had obviously a lot of skeleton pirates, right, fighting live action characters, and the way we would do it on Pirates 1 was, let's say it's Orlando fighting skeleton. We'd shoot the shot once with Orlando fighting against a stunt actor, and then we shoot it again with him just miming the sword action. And then a third time was just to get a clean plate so we could patch things out if we needed to. And in almost the idea was that hopefully you'd use the take where he was just fighting against air because it was easier. Then we didn't have to paint out the stunt performer, right? We could just add the skeleton. But in almost every case, the performance was always better when he was when any actor's fighting against somebody else. The swords are really clashing and they're really reacting to one another. So we almost always had to paint out the other actor. We almost always had to kind of match-mate their performance. In other words, kind of eyeball match our skeleton to what the stunt performer had done. And it was just a very tedious process. And so we knew on this film, look, we're going to have a CG character all the time, not just when the moon's out and they turn into skeletons, but he's CG all the time. And we want him to be nose to nose with the other actors, not because at that time, if you were doing motion capture, which we plan to use, you did it on a specialized motion capture stage that was completely separate from filming. There's a lot of elaborate equipment that you couldn't really bring onto set, especially if you're shooting on location in jungles and wherever. And so we knew we had to come up with an on-set motion capture system to capture Bill Nighy's performance on set, and it couldn't be cumbersome and it had to be lightweight. So that was the second thing. And the third thing was Davy's beard, because we knew that there was just no way we could hand animate his beard. We needed a procedural way to do that, something that recognized gravity, stickiness, collisions, but also was alive. Like it's always sort of writhing and moving with kind of tentacle behavior. So I had all three of those things. And that was super difficult to engineer. Karen Cooper and James Tooley and Rod Fedke at Stanford were the three people most responsible for that system. Anyways, that was a giant nightmare that kept me awake at night well into production. And once it worked, though, it worked fantastically well.
So are those people like more creative people, or are you employing with that like more computer programmers and mathematicians to get that programming that does that?
Well, for ILM, the three people I just named would be considered more technical, but they're all three great creative people. Like James draws really well. They're all creative problem solvers, but they're creative people. Like Karen was the one who really figured out the behaviors of the tentacles, and she just had a great feel for it. She wasn't an animator; she was approaching it from more of a technical standpoint, but she just had a great feel for how they should move. And so, they're sort of Renaissance people.
Well, we want to touch on a couple of things you just mentioned, Hal, going back to what you were saying in the beginning and what you just said recently. My first encounter with Pirates of the Caribbean was in 2000. It was in Disneyland Paris. It had nothing to do with the movie. It was in French. And when I think it was at 93 when Disney announced that they were going to start this kind of Pirates of the Caribbean type movie. I just thought, what? That ride that was in French that really nobody really got. So I understand your initial concerns, right? It's like, what are we doing here? So that was interesting. You should say that. And also, I just want to give a big shout out to Ron Fedeke, who's actually one of my colleagues. I work at Stanford. He's one of our computer science professors and specializes in computer graphics. and then natural phenomena, that kind of thing, within.
That's fine. That's
machine
fantastic.
learning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
His whole FizzBAM solver thing was a component of the system that James Tooley architected for the beard, but it was a really
Yeah.
critical part. They work hand in hand on
Yeah.
that. And yeah. No, I grew up, part of my childhood was in Southern California, and we went to Disneyland at least once a year, sometimes more, but not too often. So it remained very special. And I love Pirates of the Caribbean. It remains one of my favorite, most nostalgic
Mhm.
things. Like, I have to go on it if we go to Disneyland. Like, if I was sent to Disneyland and somebody said, okay, you can only ride one ride today, you must pick one, it would be Pirates, hands down. Probably Haunted Mansion second after that. So I'm very much old school Disneyland. I love
He
it.
hasn't been on Rise yet.
I haven't been on Rise yet. No, it's true. I've been on was it Smuggler's Run, the
Yeah.
Falcon ride.
Other one.
Rise wasn't open yet when I went, and I just haven't been back. So I'm dying to go. I've seen the videos, and
Your opinion might change once you.
I prefer Pirates of the Caribbean.
it'll be hard.
Pirates has got a lot of nostalgia, but it's
For me, it really does. Like, it just, it smells in there, and just. But I know I'm gonna love Rise. I know I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna be blown away. But Pirates has just always been. So I mean, once I understood what a special project it had the potential to be. I'd met Gore. I'd seen the artwork. I'd read the script. Then I was psyched. I was like, wow, this is going to be great. We get to actually sort of chart a new course, to use naval terminology, in the Pirates of the Caribbean world. So
I have a personal interest, which we'll talk about when we run the movie, right? There's a sequence that I have a bit of personal experience with, and I'll ask you about it at that time, and that's probably the best point to do that. But in terms of, I understand, I don't want to preempt this with incorrect facts, but I understand there was a bit of a difference, and between the visual and practical effects used on Black Pearl versus Dead Man's Chest. And you've, I think, eloquently described Davy Jones being one of them. One of the the major differences between those two movies was bringing this character to life, and the way you've described. And then in terms of 2 and 3, were they pretty much the same then, or did was there any kind of different challenges for 3 compared to 2? Was there any kind of jump forward in technology or techniques you used? You mentioned there was a short space of time, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Not in terms of Davey and his crew, that we just sort of stayed on course. I mean, there might have been minor improvements to certain things, the way we were rendering things or compositing things or whatever, but we didn't completely remodel the characters or switch to a whole different method of doing them or anything like that. The really big challenge, I mean, there were a number of specific sequence challenges on 3, but the really single big thing that was very tough nut to crack was the maelstrom, because CG water simulations are very machine intensive. They take tons of calculations, and we were trying to simulate a huge patch of ocean, just huge. And one of the things that can help with those kinds of simulations is that you're just simulating the surface. But the problem was we were simulating a cone right down into a funnel shape. And so you had a lot of Z depth as well as X and Y. And that's a lot of calculating. And the other problem with it is that this is the surface, flat, and you imagine a sort of cone shape going down underneath, and you're just trying to calculate the surface. You have a lot of wasted area on the side, around the cone, but that it's still part of the volume you're calculating, and it was a huge waste of memory. So they actually, the John Knoll and the other folks working on that problem came up with a clever thing where they sort of flattened the cone so that it was just a disc, did the simulation for all the waves with what are called normal vectors, basically the thing that tells you what straight up is at any point on the surface. They angled those in so that the waves and the foam and stuff would go the right direction once it was re-stretched back down into a cone after the simulation had been done. It was a very clever solution to getting over the hump of not just simulating it, then rendering this huge expansive ocean. Like we were, we, you know, as you know, we were fortunate. We won the Oscar for film number 2. And and that's a Sunday. The Oscars always on a Sunday. And we, you know, we're celebrating that night and everything. The next morning, Monday morning, we had a meeting with Gore on the Universal lot, I think. And it was about the work on that was, you know, already underway for 3. And it was actually not a great meeting because we had sent shots of the Maelstrom, some early shots of the Maelstrom, and he just felt like it was too small. The scale didn't feel big enough. The distances didn't seem big enough. And that's right when they were struggling with that memory problem and that, you know, rendering issue. And to sort of up the level of detail meant upping the scale of the whole simulation. And that's why that solution had to be found. But I remember that meeting. It wasn't like it was ugly or anything. And, you know, he was congratulatory, you know, that was all great. But once we got into talking about the work, it was like, you know, it's just not big enough. And it was like, oh, what are we going to do?
Yeah. Wait to be brought back down to earth, right? You've just won an Oscar,
you're
just
only
won
as good as your last
an Academy Award, and then you're like, right, okay, well, are we heading in the right direction here? I don't know. You're right. I mean, you're only as good as your last piece of work, and you know, up your game.
But we got there.
Yeah.
But that was the big thing on that. The 2, for me, 2 felt like a bigger challenge in terms of like Davey and his crew were very hard, particularly Davey, and that clearly the hardest thing to do. But the Kraken was also a big challenge. There's a lot of stuff about the Kraken and the tentacles and all that stuff that was really challenging. And then there's everything else, you know. And then 3, we felt like, okay, we're pretty good place with Davey and his crew. Like we know how to do them, we know how to make them look great. The deal there was, once we were fighting on 2 different ships at once across the Maelstrom, we realized we didn't have enough Dutchman crew for all the fighting we needed to do. So we had to come up with, quickly, build a whole bunch of new crew members. And we had this, like, there's this one guy with like half a ship's wheel melded into his body, and another guy with like a jellyfish head.
It's
and
amazing.
There's a whole bunch of great,
design.
really cool designs. And most of those, Aaron McBride, one of our art directors at ILM, designed a lot of those. Gore just said, just go run with it and come up with designs. And so that was fun, but it was also nerve-wracking. It was like, look, we just got the crew dialed in. And I was like, no, you got to make a lot more. A lot more.
And what's great is you can identify them, right? You the you know, jelly head and the guy with a half a wheel. And it's not just a case of faceless crew members who are just hanging around looking menacing. They've got individual identities, and so the work you put into that is just incredible. There's
another guy with one of those this big, it's not a clam, but sort of big clam shell, the kind with the corrugated lips. He's got one of those through the middle of his body, and it's pried open, and there's another little guy inside, like being dissolved or something. Yeah, it was super fun.
But if you think about it, I was going to say, just really quick before Spencer says something. You're so right. You know, there's not been a really, like sci-fi, right? When we went to Star Wars, we were really starved of good sci-fi. I mean, okay, you can say, you know, Close Encounters, all those that were pre-Star Wars, but in terms of pirate movies, there was nothing. I mean, nothing for years and years, probably decades. And so the work that I really enjoyed and appreciated was to create characters using your skills that were very marine-like. I mean, extremely marine-like, from whether it's a Kraken, whether it's Davy Jones, or just the regular crew. It was just such a wonderful melting pot of ideas, and just put into, I don't know, just a wonderful kind of effect of just making you feel like, wow, I feel this is, we're at sea. This is, you know, resonating with all the characters and, you know, etc. So anyway, sorry, Spencer, go ahead.
No. It's okay. I mean, I remember like when I first saw the first movie and seeing the fighting sequence on the Dauntless with the skeletons, thinking like, this is absolutely insane. This, like, we've never seen anything like this at all. And then just, you know, the going on to the Davies crew from there, it was just like, where are we going? And, you know, see where the the property's gone throughout, the different, versions that come out. It's just been absolutely incredible. But to me, like, it all started, with the cursed pirates,
And
Yeah.
and if you think about it,
and what I loved about the first one is both how groundbreaking the skeletons were, but yet how they gave you the impression of classic, like Harryhausen.
it's exactly what I was going to mention.
And the Disney cartoons with the spooky bones and the silly symphonies, as well as they did an homage to both of those as well.
If you think about it, it was very much like Jason and the Argonauts, right? It's where it's a skeleton fight at the Pantheon or whatever it was. I mean, it was that type of battle, but just streets ahead of that.
Actually, I've got a picture.
I don't think, I mean, I've not got a massive anthology of movies, but what skeleton fight has actually occurred between Jason and the Argonauts and this?
Yeah, Ray would visit Island pretty regularly,
Ooh.
and this is right when we were finishing Pirates. In fact, you won't be able to tell, but on the screen of my computer is a shot from Pirates, and I'm just talking about what we're doing. But he was really tickled.
Cool.
He thought he thought our skeletons were really good fun, and he's always such a gentleman, even if he didn't like it, say nice things about it. But I think he genuinely liked it. He seemed really tickled by it. So.
And speaking of the cursed pirates from the first movie, you showed us before, but you have a little trinket.
So one of our co-nominees for visual effects on the film, Charlie Gibson, and ILM did the main part of the visual effects work, but there was a lot of work because the films were so huge. There was a lot of work done by some outside visual effects shops, and Charlie supervised all that work. And he's just a great guy, super awesome guy. He's still out there supervising stuff. But when the film finished, he grabbed me one of the, and I know you can buy these now, but this is one of the ones from set, one of the cursed Aztec gold coins from the chest. And so
That's
he grabbed
incredible.
one of those. And then these were some rings. So V. Neal was the main makeup person on the movie, but she worked with a guy named Joel Harlow. You can look him up on IMDb. He's done a million things. He's a super talented makeup effects guy, and he started making these rings during the production. He did a kind of skull and crossbones ring and this Davy Jones ring. And later, after the movie came out, Joel made some deal with marketing to sell essentially replicas of those, but those were the ones he made while we were shooting. And you just go, you'd see somebody wear them. Where'd you get that? Oh, talk to Joel. And you go over to Joel's trailer, and he'd write your name down, and a few weeks later he'd have one ready for you that he'd made. And so that was kind of fun. He's really.
So we're just about to start off with the movie, which will start in just a second. But one thing I have to say, talking about, as we had the build up, as far as the storyline was concerned, that I loved in the third movie is you saw from day one, people were saying, "Oh my God, look at Johnny's performance! Like, that's Keith Richards." Like, so Keith Richards ended up playing his father, which is like, "Oh my God, that's incredible." And then later on they have McCartney as his uncle, but still, it's like having Keith Richards actually play Jack Sparrow's father is like, you couldn't get a better casting in that scenario.
I think I'm sure that was super fun for Johnny, because everyone knows he's a musician. He plays in a rock band. But what people may not know is that Gore Verbinski is a musician. He's got a massive collection of guitars and mandolins and all kinds of different instruments. And he played in different bands around LA in his youth, and then directed music videos. And he's quite a good musician, actually. And so I think for both of them, it's probably like a total thrill to have him there and playing that role. And he looked perfect. I mean, it was awesome.
I think he recently played at the Bond anniversary in the Albert Hall in London, and just was an amazing musician. Just incredibly blown away by how talented he was. So,
well, we're about that time right now, so we are going to start. We're actually going to do a 5-second countdown. So please make sure that you have your Disney Plus all queued up to the Disney folder, not the Star Wars folder this time.
yes.
And we're going to be watching Dead Man's Chest, which is the second movie in the series of the Pirates of the Caribbean films. So we're going to do a 5-second countdown. Is everybody ready?
Hold on, got to get all piratey.
No.
Arr.
All right. Where's your piece of 8?
And for those sending in questions, if you have questions about any of the films beyond the third film, I probably won't be able to answer them because I only worked on the first three.
Okay, that was one of my questions for the future. So excellent thing.
You can ask, just saying I may not know the answer.
They'll just make it up, and nobody
There you
we won't know that everything.
We make up
All right.
half the stuff we say anyways. So
That's
let
true.
them fact check us in the chat.
All right, we're going to be starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play. Now, you had mentioned in a previous episode we talked about earlier about the decision to jump right into the main title slide, as opposed to having the opening credits, which a lot of movies do. What was the rationale behind it?
I don't know, but I do know that just by pure dumb chance, we were on the first film, John Nolan, our visual effects producer, and I were down to show some work and have some kind of meeting with Gore. And it was during filming, so we were just meeting with him quickly on his lunch break in his trailer. And right as he came in, I don't recall who he was in conversation with, but he was right in the middle of discussing that very idea that, you know what, I think we shouldn't have a bunch of credits and stuff. We should just kind of open cold and then just have the title, go straight to the title. No names, no nothing beforehand, because, let's start making the calls and making sure we can do that. Because obviously there's a lot of contractual reasons and other things that could get in the way of that, and they must have smoothed all that over and made it work. But I just remember happened to be a fly on the wall, right? When they were having that idea and thinking that was something they wanted to pursue. That doesn't answer your question, though. I don't know why. I think maybe it just appealed to Gore to just kind of launch you into this world and not have all of the, I'm just guessing, and not have all of the usual movie furniture up front that tells you, we're about to start the movie. It was more just like, you're in this world. You're in it now. And I kind of dig that. I think it's great. I'm glad he was successful. And
Oh yeah, absolutely. It kind of reminds me also like with Star Wars, like for example, you'd have the crawl and then you would go right into like epic action. So
the only Star Wars had was the just like this, the Lucasfilm logo. It said the Disney logo. That was it. And then put it on, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But that's not a credit. That's immersive. So
Right. Yeah.
it's the same idea. Very, very similar idea. And I tended, as an A&M soup, I don't tend to be on set for scenes that we're not adding creatures to. Like the visual effects supervisor, especially for a movie like this, is on set pretty much throughout shooting because there's almost always something that's going to be done, some environment addition or fix. But I tend to target it and just go when like it's a Davy Jones scene or something else that we're going to be animating things in. And I just mention that in case somebody's like, hey, could you tell me what it was like shooting that scene on the day? It's like, I don't know, I wasn't there. But for the scenes that I was there, I'll try and talk about them a little bit.
I mean, I believe that they do. They left the set for Port Royal in spot, so they actually do tours of the location, which is actually kind of cool.
Yeah, and Gore really fought for as much actual location work in the Caribbean as possible, because there's always pushback and budgetary concerns, and there was talk about, hey, can we shoot some of this on the Disney Ranch? We'll bring in a lot of palm trees and stuff, and Gore was really like, no, just we need to go there, and he really fought for it. And even for things like the interior of Beckett's office, when you look out the window, that set is not a soundstage with some environment matted outside. Now, in the first film, we did do that. Like there were scenes where Kira flings open the windows to her bedroom, and what was out there was not really out there, like blue screen out there. And some of those shots were a bit of a struggle. I mean, I think they're fine, but there's a little artificial edge to some of those shots, not all of them. And on the second one, Gore was like really adamant. Like, I want to go there. I want to build these rooms there. When you look out a window, I want to see the real ocean. And he really fought for that. And I think it shows. I think it's wonderful. Like it really you can feel it in the film.
Speaking about being in the locations, I have to tell you that out of the four of us, John was with me in London, and I just kept on thinking about you when we were at the tube stop.
Canary Wharf.
Oh, Canary Wharf.
Yeah, like
Yeah, we definitely thought about you when we saw that. Yes. So again, this is kind of lead into a sequence that I know you're involved in a little later on in the movie. But just as you mentioned, I had personal experience where I visited Grand Bahama Island. Not on Dead Man's Chest, but when Black Pearl had just wrapped up shooting there, and I just happened to be there on vacation, and I kept looking around these bars, thinking, where are all the photographs that people have got pinned up behind the bars? You could see various cast and crew, and I asked about it. I said, "What is this?" Well, they've just finished wrapping up production of Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, and they actually had in one of the local beaches, they had a mock-up of the Black Pearl where they'd been shooting sequences. So you're right, I know you're right in exactly what you're saying. A Go would want to have as many practical effects, many location shoots as possible. And he used, a couple of beaches in Grand Bahama Island, and I saw it all. And even to the point where you could see stuff that was left on the beach from dyeing the water to make it look bluer.
Yeah, we went back to Grand Bahama on the second film too, second and third films. And the Pearl got rebuilt because in the first film, probably what you saw was sort of like a set on a barge, kind of like it was on the water. You could, if you were on it and looking out, you could see ocean, and that was the point. But
that's exactly right.
It wasn't really a seagoing thing. So in the second film, what they did was they bought a ship that was roughly the right length and dimensions, but like a modern ship, like a steel-hulled trawler or something. I don't know what, I'm not seafaring folk like your family, John. And but they bought that and they built a new Black Pearl around that, and it had its own engines and everything, so it could go out to sea. But it changed the dimensions of the Black Pearl a little bit. So the 6-scale miniature that we had at ILM, that had to be rebuilt to match the new Black Pearl. And then of course they built the Flying Dutchman, which was also seagoing, so they could have the two ships out in the ocean next to each other. Now neither ship had complete sails, because that's sort of dangerous if you're not built to be a sailing ship and you've got these big sails that can catch the wind and capsize. So the sails only went up, 25 feet or something. So, and like any shots like this, great, you're done. There's no visual effect there. They're just blowing smoke past at night. Probably anchored at a wharf actually for stuff like this in Grand Bahama or similar location, depending on what stage of filming it was. But if you looked up at any time, if you see like proper full sails or you're wide, we've had to add those in after the film. But for most of this kind of work, you were done. There's no visual effects needed, which is great. That's what you want, especially when you have so many other things to do. You don't want to give yourself that kind of work in shot after shot after shot if you can find clever ways out of it.
Yeah, it would have been pointless to like have a CGI parrot or whatever there just so you had to touch every single thing.
Yes. Now, and the cursed monkey, you just get yourself a real cursed monkey so you can avoid.
Yeah, we could buy one of those. We could get one somewhere.
So talking about in the first movie, I want to talk a little bit about a casting thing. It's very funny. Is that especially with Guardians of the Galaxy 3 coming out this coming weekend, Zoe Saldana had a speaking small role in the first one.
I know.
And it's really just seeing her progression in her career, where she was one of the go-tos between this property, Guardians, and Avatar, and it's just like her career is just booming.
If they'd been psychic, they might have written her a bigger role in 2 or 3. Kept her as part of the thing, but no one knew. And you can see her her magnetism just in the first film, and you look at her and think, oh yeah, she's going places. But people don't know, and it is what it is. But it is funny to go back to that first film and go, oh yeah, that's always Saldana.
Yeah, I watched it. I'm like, that's one of my favorite, like my favorite games is like my wife is like, we like to watch movies. It's like, okay, that, and then go to IMDb. It's like, okay, that's exactly who I thought it was. So
Yeah, that's good fun. And the parrot, more and more these days, we're doing animals like that aren't extraordinary. They're just there. We're doing them in CG, mainly just because there's kind of less and less appetite for trained animals now. There's a feeling that even if you're not putting them through anything extraordinary, they're just hanging out on set, that even that can be stressful for animals, because you have gunfire and all kinds of crazy things. So that was not the case on this film. When the monkey isn't cursed, it's a real monkey. The parrot's a real parrot. But I just mentioned that I've noticed that as a trend in visual effects now, that even in very casual scenes with dogs and things, that sometimes now we're being asked to do them in CG just to spare an animal from the kind of stress. This guy was great. But is it Tom? Tom. Guy that plays Beckett. Anyways, really nice guy.
Tom Hollander. Tom Hollander. Yeah.
And I don't know him well, but there were one or two times standing around on set when he'd be near, and it just seemed natural to chat. And he's very, very, very nice guy, very funny, witty guy.
It's funny you should talk about using animals on set. And I understand they're trained, and a lot of them have licenses of professionals, and they've been doing it years.
Oh, yeah.
But I have friends who have macaws and parrots, and they're so difficult to work with. They just don't shut up. Like they make so much noise, and it must be so hard to, if they're in a particular mood, try and work with them. Particularly when they're you're up against it in terms of timing, budget, and resources. And these things just go off on one.
We worked with a dog on Mandalorian season 2. There was a stand-in for the Mastiffs, for the Tusken Raiders dogs, and it was just there to kind of give the actor an eye line. It was in that first scene when Cobb and Mando run into the Tusken Raiders in the canyon.
Yeah.
Right.
And Mando comes in and kind of kneels down, and one of them runs up to him and he gives it a treat and he starts petting it. And that was the main reason we had the dog there. His name was Roach, and he was just a great dog, super smart and well behaved. And he came to set in his own mocap suit. It was a
nice
mocap, and I think they just did it just in case. We just used him as visual reference, but it is a mocap suit.
Here's a question for you, Hal. I mean, hopefully, I think you're qualified to answer this, right? But we all, notoriously understand the difficulties that Spielberg had with Jaws.
Oh, yeah.
And I know things are different these days, right, in terms of technology and the resources that we can put into movies. But were there any? Did you hear about any difficulties or experience any difficulties with shooting at on the ocean at all, or was it pretty straightforward?
Let me think. There were some issues. So you mentioned Grand Bahama, and on the first film, I think they just shot wherever they shot there. On the second film, they had this big scheme to build essentially an inlet tank, sort of shooting tank there that's connected to the ocean but protected by a big sand
I
berm.
remember seeing that in the extra scenes.
And they did build it, but there was something about it, the way it was set up and oriented to the ocean, that we started joking that it was actually a wave magnifier rather than.
Yes, it's
so
having the opposite effect.
Yeah, that could be a problem at times. So I never ended up doing any shooting at sea. I was kind of bummed. I would like to have. I spent a night. We did a whole night shoot on the wrecked ship that where Orlando first encounters Davy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's as close as I got, but that was sort of out in the middle of that man-made lagoon at night. So it wasn't floating. It was sort of anchored there and it just sat. But there were a bunch of scenes I was on the Black Pearl for where it was up against the wharf is not the right word, the pier or whatever. It was lashed up in that lagoon. So if you looked out, you just saw ocean out there, but it was tied up. And it would start to, when the swell was up, it would start bobbing up and down. And at night, you couldn't, people always say, well, keep your eye on the horizon. Well, there's no horizon, it's nighttime. There was smoke and everything. I was on set for this scene. I love that makeup. It was so
Stellar.
cool. We added those little tree bugs, and I started talking. The seawater dribbles out of them. It's so great.
Yep.
This was a pretty much the whole lower deck and main deck of the Black Pearl built on a stage at Universal, an interior stage on a big gimbal so it could rock back and forth. So when you see like lanterns and things kind of swaying, that's just the whole thing could really move. Now, also there are shots where they're doing this with the camera when they don't really need to be running the whole gimbal. But it was a pretty cool set, and you have rain on it and everything else. Likewise, they had a set like this for the Dutchman that was indoors, that was for shooting scenes at night and below decks and all that. That was not out at sea. But anyways, the Pearl, because I get seasick, sadly, because I love the ocean, but I'm someone who gets seasick. So I had to really watch it. And the thing is, the other reason I couldn't sort of focus on any fixed object is because I was manning these cameras. I spoke before about this on-set motion capture thing, and it depended on several of us having little cameras we'd set up for each shot to kind of triangulate Davy's position. And I had to be focused on that and shooting. And boy, I got really green a couple of times. Fortunately, the crew had a bunch of remedies: ginger, bonine, Dramamine, pot. That's apparently a well-known in cannabis, well-known. But I really had to watch it. If I started feeling even a little tickle, I was like, all right, I'd have to hand the camera off and get off the boat and just chill for a little bit. But that one time is the only problem with that I had on the whole shoot, because there are various times when you had to be on little boats going here or there and doing things, but that was the only time I got a little
Don't you see that that Bootstrap looks a lot like one of the guys who started the rebellion?
yeah.
His hair's nowhere near as good though.
Yeah, Star Wars adjacent again.
And
so when you're doing this and he's so heavily made up there and you're adding CGI parts to it, do they do the makeup based on models that you've done in CGI, or do you just start doing the CGI based on the makeups that they've done?
In this case, the second one. Like they shot it, they designed it, they put real barnacles on them and all that, and then we went in and made matching little barnacles that might close or open here or there, and other little widgets. We didn't have to do an awful lot to him. Most of the stuff we did to him was in this scene. We did a few shots later on where we added little bits of life to him. The reason he's the only one of Davy's crew that isn't is the feeling was he's relatively new to the crew. And you can see him actually get worse over the course of the second film. He's relatively new to the crew, and he had real acting heavy lifting to do. Davy did too, but we knew Davy had to be CG. I mean, there was just no question there. Whereas Bootstrap, we're like, it could be a guy in makeup, but it's fine. And we'll bridge those two worlds. So that's why he was in makeup.
Well, once we got to the third movie, and then he became part of the ship per se, and he had was buried in the wall. It was kind of like,
and that could have been CG, because by that time we did that sort of hallucination scene where Jack imagines himself kind of like Wyvern crunched into the wall, and he sort of peels himself away and half his brain's missing.
Right.
And we did that in CG. So, we could have done the really advanced Bootstrap that way, but we just chose not to. This was a tough shot, the transition from night to day in a single shot and all that. And I love these two guys on this boat. Apparently, I only learned this later, they're speaking two different dialects of Greek, I believe. One is Cypriot Greek, and I think the other one is Greek or something, but they're a little bit different. And I don't think that was planned. Like, it's not like anyone scripted that. I think it was just got these actors, and they're like, oh, well, we can do this thing, and so that was kind of neat.
I'll check into that. My wife speaks both forms of Greek. So.
And if I'm lying, let me know. But I heard.
Oh,
that
no. I'm not saying you are. She will.
No.
The subtitle said speaks Turkish. So
yeah, I was about to say.
They'd be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
But you were just talking about that sequence where Johnny peels off, with his brains left behind. I mean, again, when I was watching these, as a younger man in the cinema. It's like, I haven't seen anything like this before. It's those moments that you guys thrill us with. Goodness, I've never seen anything like that before. That's just incredible.
It was fun. I mean, our goal with that effect especially was not for people to say, certainly
That's
not to say, look at that cool CGI. It was really for them to hopefully go, oh my God, look what they did to Johnny. Like, in other words, to still feel as if they're looking at Johnny in some form, but we transformed him. And, I think it's pretty good. It holds up pretty well for, 20 years old. Davey, I think, holds up extremely well.
Oh, exactly. I was reading an article before we came on here. It's like, what makes Davy Jones like the best CG character that holds up for 15 years at least?
Yeah, we're brilliant. It's like in a bottle. No, go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I definitely want to give huge kudos and touch back to what you were saying about Gollum. This, Bill Nighy being a British, we all knew who Bill Nighy was, right? Because he's a British actor, maybe not across the world as renowned, but for you to create a character very much like Gollum in terms of the stature of this particular movie franchise, you nailed it, because, Bill Nighy is Davy Jones, and he became that character because of the work that you guys did, and it was very much like Gollum. The parallels are
which is very funny you should say that, John, because I remember seeing, I believe it was Half-Blood Prince, and the opening scene, you see Bill Nighy, like a full pan to his face, and everybody's like, okay, well, there's Davy Jones. And that was the first thing that anybody thought of.
The Welsh Minister of Magic. Yeah.
Yes.
Jim Burkett, who was kind of Gore's story guy on this film, did a lot of storyboards and stuff. He made a short film with those two characters, the two women from Port Royal. I think between 2 and 3 or after 3. I think you could find it online. I forget what it's called, but he made a little short film.
That lens shot of, is it the Black Pearl sat on the on the beach?
Long conversations about what a period telescope should look like.
So I'm gonna ask a question you may not know. Is this a Nepali coast in just off Kauai? Because it looks very much like it.
It's Dominica.
Oh, okay.
But we've augmented all the mountains to make them look scarier. But it's Dominica, not to be confused with the Dominican Republic. This is further east and south. There, by the way, that's the 6-scale miniature matted into a real helicopter plate. So all these shots, that's the miniature. That's the miniature. There was a wall built there to cast a shadow and to tie the ropes to. The ropes are real, but the ship is the miniature 6-scale miniature Black Pearl, and in all these shots. And I've always been really like, that's not my part of the work, so I feel like I can just kind of glow about it a little bit without sounding too self-serving. I just think these shots are seamless and really amazing. I look every time I look at them, I'm like, I can't. That's crazy to me.
Completely. I would have never known that was a miniature. I just assumed there's a full-scale ship there.
Like 12 to 15 feet long.
Movie magic.
Movie magic. Yeah. I always like this gag too. The camouflage gag is super fun.
Just like you, Hal, I did a catamaran ride up the Nepali coast, which I know they did some sequence of Pirates of the Caribbean at some point, and King Kong and various things. And I was shooting like you. I had a camera off the front of the catamaran, and I got so seasick.
Yeah.
Oh, they said you're going to feel it on the way back, and I was like, oh no, I'm having a great time. I'm shooting sequences for home movies, and oh my gosh, on the way back. Oh.
The whole Cannibal Island thing was so fun. This was a location I did go to and spend a good amount of time on, not for this part of the shooting, but for the later part when they're all chasing the chest around and running around through the coconut groves and all that, and the mill wheel rolling down the hill and all those the bone cages and all that stuff.
This reminds me a lot about the scene on Endor when they get caught up in the net and Ewoks are coming in.
Yep. And like, this is a helicopter plate, but then we've most of what you're seeing is CG, but it started as a real helicopter plate of the mountains on Dominica because they're quite rugged and beautiful. They're just not quite this cinematically rugged, with the rope bridges and all that. And the advantage of starting with a real helicopter plate is that you have all this real lighting reference and so forth to sort of ground your work in, even if you end up replacing a lot of it. And then they built these bridges and that's like a real location. It's not obviously as the drop isn't as far as implied, but and then shots like this, we have to do a lot of work to the background. And so you couldn't string up blue screen behind all those huts and people and feathers and all that stuff. You just had to, by hand, people had to go in and rotoscope out those things so we could add things to the background, like the higher peaks and the dramatic skies and stuff. Which was a ton of work. In fact, that was one part of the work partway through the production where we said, well, let's talk to some other VFX companies about farming out some of this work, what we call roto paint work, where you're sort of tracing around on the footage. And we sent it to a couple companies who said, it's too hard. We didn't want to take on the work.
We're going to pass. So, good luck.
We got it done on our own. But it was really hard work. But again, the advantage is, you weren't like shooting this on a stage or against some big blue screen where you get that weird kind of blue cast on things and a kind of an artificial lighting feel. It's like the real lighting. We just, touched in an extra high mountain peak in the background, like that one. Well, I don't know. We're all in sync here, but some of those super spiky islands in the background you see in some of these shots have been added, and some of the mountaintops and stuff. So,
having been lucky enough to spend a lot of time in the Caribbean, this is just spot on with islands like St. Lucia, Antigua. It's very much I know it's Dominica, but very much in that kind of theme of those islands.
I like and also the different versions of the alluding to the dog tableau in the first one, and in the first Pirates they actually did the dog tableau where they're trying to. This one you think they're doing it again, and they pan over and it's Kira sitting there.
And he also had mentioned the dog earlier. He's like, "Where's that dog with the kid?"
Yeah, exactly.
Just that kind of stuff's a lot of fun.
Nice little tie into the ride.
It's one of the best parts of that. Yeah. That's hilarious.
I love Jonathan Pryce, that actor.
He's a phenomenal actor.
So great. He's good at playing funny in the midst of seriousness and seriousness in the midst of fun. Like he's really good at straddling both those worlds, being comedic, but being able to switch right into genuinely afraid or serious or whatever. Like just so good. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, I like what they've done with a lot of these interior scenes here, as well as I assume purposely making it look like the queue of the ride. The interior of the castle. It's like
very much, the castle and the sort of colonial architecture and the blue moonlighting and torchlight and all that stuff. It's like being in the Blue Bayou restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. Just quickly back to what you said about Jonathan Pryce. For you, Hal, and all the people out there who didn't know, I'm an English literature major, and so I studied Shakespeare. And when I was young, I would see the likes of Jonathan Pryce and Timothy Dalton and Jeremy Irons tread the boards. They weren't famous. It was their craft. It was their business, and
Oh, lucky you! That's amazing.
Yeah. Yep.
One of my favorite films is Lion and Winter, which has a very young Timothy Dalton in it, playing Ian Philip of France, and Peter O'Toole and Catherine Hepburn and Hannibal Lecter.
I'll tell you, to take the story a little bit further really quickly. My mom studied English literature as well, decades before me, and when she would go to Stratford-upon-Avon, the Globe, it was people like Peter O'Toole, it was Richard Harris, it was Anthony Hopkins, Richard Burton. Yeah, they were upcoming actors in the Shakespearean scene. So we're lucky enough. We're very lucky to have wonderful British actors.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Just like Kira and everybody else, when they were starting out in their careers. Very lucky. And I did, I think, Spencer, I showed you the Globe in London, right? Recently.
You did when we were on the tour. On the boat ride. And a funny little thing about there, if you want to tie in Kira into Star Wars as well,
just-
she was the doppelganger for Natalie.
I was just about to say that. Yet
And me.
another Star Wars tie-in. There is.
Well, and Hal, one of our major movie buffs from the group is in the chat here and agreeing with you that that's such a great movie, and then loving the visuals of this location that you can tell it's done in the Caribbean as opposed to
Yeah.
like movie 4 and 5 that were shot elsewhere that just don't have that kind of same.
Yep. Yeah, this room, I mean, you're looking out at the ocean out there, the Caribbean. That's a ship out there. And that's whatever that lighting is, that dying, the sun's gone down about 10 minutes before, but there's still a little bit of light. That's the real deal out there. It's pretty great. It's pretty great. But, you can imagine the pressures too. You shoot this on a soundstage, you be there all night with the same lighting, but because that is the real world outside there, they have to get the scene quickly at the right time of it's added pressures and costs and all that. But he fought for it, and I'm glad he did. I mean, these movies were on such a crazy scale. If you ever saw the this is a great scene. If you ever saw the setup for shooting the Maelstrom, where they had a full-size Dutchman deck and full-size Pearl deck, and they were on enormous steel gimbals that could tilt them toward each other on a gigantic stage that was a former airplane hangar out in north of LA. What's it called? It'll come to me later. It's a former air base, but now gets used for filming a lot. It's just an enormous building. Just you've never seen it. It's just huge. And 700 feet of blue screen around the whole thing, and just rain pouring down, and full crew on both ships, and people swinging across from ship to ship on ropes and stuff. It's just absolutely insane. There's our miniature Pearl again, and our friend the dog.
I love that line. It's like, you can't read. It's like, we get points for trying,
Yes.
So, when I saw this movie, it's harping back to British actors that you guys may not have heard of previously to this movie, but I can't think of the character name now, but the taller one. He was in The Office.
Yes,
He was in The Office with Ricky Gervais. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. With his wooden eyeball. There's our miniature ship again.
Well, I love the fact that ended up turning out to be Barbossa's piece of 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How ironic.
Yep. Yeah, these two guys are great. I remember during the I guess I could bring it up then, but I'm already talking about during the Kraken attack. There's a scene where they're in the captain's cabin and they're watching this big tentacle snake through.
Yeah.
And I remember Gore delivering a little piece of direction between takes where they shot a take, and he said, "It's only funny if the fear is real." And I was like, "Oh, that's brilliant." So in other words, don't do comedy fear. Like, just do real fear. Like, you're terrified, and that'll play funnier in context than trying to be like a funny version of fear. And I thought, oh, that's amazing.
It kind of remind me like the Audrey 2 tentacles that Frank Oz utilized in the Little Shop of Horrors movie.
And that work is still, to me, just blows my mind. The animatronic work in Little Shop of Horrors, just insane. This was super fun.
But what's also amazing, we talk about all the work, amazing work you guys do in this, but there's a lot of chemistry, right? The chemistry between certain actors who are playing, the two characters, like Abbott Costello, if you like, on the beach. The chemistry, that just the way they interact with each other, it's like it's lightning in a bottle, right? It's you can't just make that stuff up.
I'm trying to remember the actor's name that plays the small guy.
Marty.
Yeah, Marty.
They did a bunch of takes of this thing swinging, in the part where it's swinging, and then they finished. He got out and he immediately threw up. But I would have too. There's no way I could have done that.
Mm-hmm.
So this sequence with Johnny there, dancing with the tribe. I've been lucky enough to see him play live twice with the the Hollywood Vampires, and he's
Oh,
a
cool.
very,
Yeah, they're
very talented musician.
Is it? Is he? I've
Fair
only
play.
seen clips. Yeah, I never seen
His
it.
his guitar work is amazing.
Oh, that's great.
Fair play.
That's great. Yeah, he seems like he's pretty serious about it too. I mean, acting's obviously been his main profession, but that run, his lizard, we call that his lizard run.
Yeah.
This
Hey,
sequence,
did you see the video, the TikTok of the guy doing different Disney characters on the treadmill, and one of them he actually did dressed as Jack Sparrow on the treadmill. And he
No,
did the
huh?
whole- it was actually pretty
is it
cool.
great? Yeah, that's awesome. This it doesn't happen now, but it comes a little bit later where he pole vaults over the chasm.
Yeah,
That had been boarded, and they were heading off to shoot and do stuff. And Gore said, I want to previs this, but I kind of want to do it on the down low because he would, there were always budgetary pressures and stuff. And so I just went off and did it as a little project on my own. And I had storyboards from Jim Burkett, the guy I mentioned earlier who did the short film.
Mhm.
And Jim was our head of story, by the way, on Rango. He's just a great guy, really brilliant. So I had his pencil storyboards. And then I previewed in 3D in animation the whole bit of him pole vaulting over and then falling backwards and smashing through all the little bridges down below and
Mhm.
the skewer coming off and the fruit falling and that whole thing. And then later I heard that it caused this whole. Gore was happy because he had what he needed and he had it kind of under the table, so to speak. Because then he sort of got to set and was like, yeah, this is what we're shooting. And so then there were some other folks, money folks who were like, what? Where does previous come from? And all this. And, I didn't get in trouble for it, but people would jokingly later when I was on set, some of them would like jokingly be like, "Oh, you're the guy that." Like, I just follow orders.
Yeah.
But it was super fun, and it's pretty much shot for shot what the previous was. So that a lot of that's owed to Jim doing great boards, but it's pretty much the only thing that changed was we ended up flopping the screen direction to the whole sequence just for some I forget why. But outside of that, it's pretty much like exactly what we did, which is fun. It helped plan it out that way.
What's great about the sequence you describe and the one we're watching now is the way that they have the close-ups, the headshots, where something's actually, it's not just like a still shot. There's actually motion going on around them.
Yeah.
You'll see them traveling across the chasm in the ball, and you'll see them like this. It's almost like they strap a GoPro or something close by, and
there's exactly. I know what you're talking about when they're all screaming, and it's like yeah. There's a thing here in this sequence which already happened when they were swinging, and it went into that kind of waltz, sort of Strauss waltz music, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That Gore seems to like, because there's a moment in Rango when they're being chased down what we call the Bat Canyon in the wagon.
Yep,
And
I know
Rango is, I think, hanging from a bat on a rope in Beans' dress, and it goes into kind of slow motion, classical, like da-na-na-na, as you just,
Yeah.
And there's a very similar kind of feel, which it tickles me. It's like, oh, there's something in that Gore really enjoys, the kind of lunacy of it, and so it's great. And it's also a little bit Warner Brothers in some ways.
Very
Right.
Wile E.
Fun
Coyote.
Indeed.
It's funny because we see something that we recognize as, being stupid, or something we've encountered as being stupid.
Yeah.
Or silly. It's not
Silly,
stupid.
yeah. And there are themes I've learned to identify that obviously are important to Gore. That in Pirates, particularly across 2 and 3, there's this, one of the storylines is the East India Trading Company kind of taking over, and the kind of wild days of the pirates is sort of dying out, kind of thing. Like essentially corporations taking over.
Right.
And in Rango, that's a theme with the mayor and his whole plan with the water and everything. And then Lone Ranger, same thing, sort of dying out, the old Wild West and the railroad coming in and all that. It's definitely, there's a through line there in a bunch of his films on that topic.
Do you know, I want to pay huge compliment to I read about The Lone Ranger, right? And the critics panned it, said, don't watch it. It's not worth your time. Don't waste your money. My wife and I were literally driving home from work, and we said, let's go see a movie. And we saw Lone Ranger, and I said, critics aren't very good. That's the GoPro sequence I'm
Yep,
talking about.
And there's more of those shots you're talking about coming right up.
And my
There.
wife and I went to see it, and we loved it. We said it was probably the best movie we'd seen that year. It was great. It was
That's
absolutely
great.
wonderful.
That's great. But
But don't always listen to the critics.
I ended up. It's one of the few films Gore. Well, actually, I think it's the only film Gore did with ILM that I didn't end up working on. It didn't have a big animation component, and I think I was committed to some other show already, and so my sort of second in command on Rango, Kevin Martell, who by that time was a full-fledged anim soup in his own right, he took, and Gore knew him and had comfort with him because he'd worked with him on a couple things by that point. He took on that show, and I forget what I was doing at the time, but it's the only thing he's done with us that I didn't end up working on.
The kid with the butter knife.
This goofy sequence with the fruit.
The way that they're just still stuck in this cage, just running. Lift it up like a woman's skirt. Just run with it.
Yeah, this was actually they were shooting this the first day I got to Dominica. They were shooting this bit of stuff. And then this was in a different location that I never actually got to, this narrow canyon with the water and all that. The stuff above where it was going through that big meadow and all that. That was quite different.
Because originally back in the 70s and 80s, I think with Lucasfilm, they really preferred to shoot, certainly scenes like this on Hawaii. I mean, it was very much Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, for sure. I think the reason that Hawaii didn't get used, at least on the first three films, I think some stuff, as you said, got shot there later on, was just because they already had, like, they knew they were going to St. Vincent for Port Royal, and they knew they were going, you know what I mean? They knew they were going to be based there. And so I think the prospect of shooting both in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, way out in the Pacific, was daunting from from a logistics standpoint. Everyone
this
there.
is just so wonderful.
Oh my goodness.
Shish kebab.
Yep. It's a very flippy shish kebab. Whoops.
And the weight of it.
Oh.
And they did a real stunt. The close shots of the guy unwinding on the cord, that was Johnny's stunt guy doing that, and then ended up doing by 1 foot. But then when you go really wide again, it's digital.
It's very Buster Keaton-esque,
Oh yeah.
And leading up to that was a lot of kind of Indiana Jones style and old Western style stuff.
Oof.
For sure. Yeah, it's utterly ridiculous. But it was super fun. His face when he sees the spear coming at him.
Yeah.
Oh no. What next? Oh, that damn monkey with the eye. That's a theme right throughout the movies. The monkey with the eye.
Or can tell. Rigetti? No, Rigetti. I
There
never remember which is which.
You're trying to eat it.
This long after.
Jack.
Go get it back.
We named the monkey Jack.
I think a lot of the run from Jack Sparrow is actually a little bit of is embedded in Edward Scissorhands, because he kind of had that weird kind of little shimmy as he kind of walked and run with his hands.
Kind of just Johnny Depp, but
yeah. Well, some of what makes Johnny Depp so good in so many of his roles is Johnny Depp being Johnny Depp.
Yeah. He's a chameleon. Well, literally in Rango, but no, sorry. Yeah. That's our miniature ship again, by the way.
So you had mentioned earlier that Haunted Mansion came out around, or you weren't sure if they came out when they came out compared to each other, and it actually came out about 4.5 months after this, or after,
Right.
after
Really?
the original one. I mean, Curse of the Black
The one
Pearl.
with Eddie Murphy, right?
Yeah, the original in 2003. So they both came out in 2003, but the first Pirates was like July, so the beginning of summer, and then that came out after Halloween for some reason. I think if they would have flip flopped them,
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
Haunted Mansion come out prior to Pirates, it might have done better.
Right.
I think it was kind of, there was comparisons and stuff as well, because
Yeah.
they're both ride themed movies.
Yeah.
Melissa in our YouTube chat said she loves the running scene with the native behind Jack. It's like a twisted version of the Chariots of Fire.
It's Chariots of Fire
Slow
with
motion.
cannibals.
Yeah, right.
There was a you're probably all familiar with what a call sheet is. It's they give it to you the day before the next day shooting to let everyone know who needs to be where, when, and what special requirements for the day and all that. And somewhere I've got a call sheet. It was actually when we were still in LA before we'd gone to location, and they were doing casting calls for cannibals that they would feature cannibal players that they feature, shooting with later in the production. And so it said in the middle, it said casting callbacks at lunch with gore. And I just love that because it sounds like something completely different than what it is. But
with gore. Yeah.
yeah. Cannibal callbacks at lunch with gore.
There we go.
Just touching back on what Jeff said, because people say things and it strikes a light bulb in my mind. My first behind the scenes tour at Universal was Haunted Mansion, Casper, and Apollo 13. I think we're all being shot in Universal.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it reminded me of something that I will always cherish about working on these movies. So again, when I was a kid, part of my childhood, we lived in Southern California, went to Disneyland, but we'd also go to Universal Studios once a year or so and do the tour. And that was the only real connection to like movie making that we had. No one despite living in Southern California, no one in my family, extended family, or anyone we knew worked in the movie business. So my brother and I were always thrilled to go there and ride the tram and see the sound stages and all that stuff. So when we're the very beginning of shooting on Pirates 2, the first stuff we did was on stages at both Universal and the Disney lot. Mm-hmm. And we're on the Universal lot. It's like the first week of shooting. And I'd gone outside at some point to just get some fresh air and take a little break. And I'm sitting there on my butt, leaning up against the wall, and the tram goes by, and I hear them saying, and just over there, they're filming the sequel to Pirates of the Caribbean. I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
It was so cool. I'm on the other side of the looking glass, Yeah, that was really great. I like all these guys. This is great casting here too. Really, his whole crew and this whole thing with the dress.
The arguing behind the meaning of the dress. This is what it means. We can't keep it. No, we can.
And they're so
luck. No, bad luck.
Like later when she has the flaming thing on, and she's just like, oh my, it takes them forever to get the point. And it's super funny. Fighting over the dress. You can each take a turn wearing it. And that's so good.
This is why I said to Spencer the other day, watch more Pirates of the Caribbean. It's brilliant.
And then some of these ships are real ships, and I forget which ones. Like, I don't know which ship this is. This could be the Lady Washington, which stood in for the Interceptor in the first film, because I know they used her again in Pirates 2. It's hard to know when you're sort of on the deck looking out. An expert would know. I don't know, but I went up this river. This is on Dominica. It's called Indian River. And I had a free day, and they weren't shooting on it yet, but I knew they'd scouted it. So I went down, and there was a guy who would just like row you up the river for nothing. And so we just cruised up there. It was beautiful. Looked just like this, exactly like this. Maybe a little less smoke. I think they piped in the smoke. A nice God race in the trees. But it was just beautiful.
This has like Jungle Cruise vibes right here.
Totally.
Very, very similar.
They have the classic Disney ride.
Well, it made into a movie.
Yeah, but they still can't quite capture the thing that is Pirates of the Caribbean and that movie series, this movie series.
Well, no. I
Well,
mean,
especially when they do.
So here's a question, right? So we have Star Wars Celebration in Japan 2025. Do they have a Pirates of the Caribbean in Tokyo? And is it in Japanese
Yeah, good question.
or a jungle ride? We'll see.
I've been on Disneyland one, and I've been on the one in Florida, which I didn't like as much in Florida because it doesn't have the waterfall.
You know,
Nah.
the funny thing
yeah,
about it
it's
is that
better in California.
they're in California, and every time, like I had not been to before Anaheim for Celebration, been to the Disneyland probably 30 some odd years, and I remember I've been to Florida umpteen amount of times and done the ride. I'm like, they must have cut the ride short because
Yeah,
it's
that was
longer.
good.
And then as soon as we get back
That
to
was good.
California, I'm like, and that is why I remember this, because I remember from when I was a child, and that's what ruined it for me. I was like, they messed up the ride in Florida. And
Jungle Boat Cruise is great in Florida. They have that whole interior part that we don't have in California. That temple you go through, that's really cool. And I think the Haunted Mansions are kind of on par with each other. They're each different, have their own cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I love the one in California when they do the overlay for for Christmas and do the Nightmare Before Christmas and all that stuff. It's very cool.
This was a cool set. So this interior and exterior were all part of one big soundstage set at Disney. The water, everything. It was a massive, massive set. It was not shot in the Caribbean. It was shot on the Disney stages, and it was a super cool set. Like really cool. The art direction, set deck, and she's amazing. She's so
the only two girlfriends I can officially declare because my wife approves is this young lady and Femi Taylor because my wife approves.
She's great.
She loves them both.
It's funny because I think when they were prepping the film, like early on, I think she was meant to be much more like, an older, like completely different kind of woman. And somebody was like, no, she should be, I don't know, young and beautiful, but still scary and witchy and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting choice. I don't know when or where that. I just know I'd seen early production art that was very different in character for her, and she was great in it. She was just great.
Rather than being old and grizzled. Sorry, I'm just laughing because the sequence where he shoots the monkey to prove. Yeah. Just laugh. Oh, God.
So in Tokyo Disneyland, because I have the app already downloaded.
I'm looking at the map right now.
There is a Pirates of the Caribbean. There's Jungle Cruise. There is a Haunted Mansion. So all of those main Splash Mountain, all of those kind of main movies made into or rides made into movies.
Right. That's great. I wonder what it means to folks there. I mean, it's not like the Pirates of the Caribbean. It only means something culturally to like people in California because we grew up with Disneyland and with movies and stuff about pirates. But it's not like if you grew up in Louisiana,
right,
you would get both. You would get all the cultural references, but you'd also have just real historical references from where you lived that they were pirates there and they used this cove and they used that cove and there's a famous story about this town next door and all that kind of thing. But I wonder in places like Disneyland Paris and well, no, pirates were a big deal of course in European waters.
Europe.
More so. So there's a whole culture there.
Well, and it was the French and British colonies that were plagued by the pirates as well. So
yeah, I think any seafaring culture is kind of a universal thing that's understood. So she's great. She's so good.
I love how like learned Rigetti is. Like he had like these philosophical lines. It's like and everybody looks at him like, how do you know this? Like,
yeah, exactly. There's a lot of there's funny lines in these movies that don't often get laughs.
Oh,
little ones. Like in the first movie, toward the end, Jack runs into Patel and Rigetti in the treasure cave, and they've got their guns on him. and he says, "I invoke parlay," and Pintel says, "Damn to the depths, whatever Muttonhead thought of the word parlay," and Jack says, "That would be the French," and I laughed so hard first time I heard that. But I noticed like it didn't get a big laugh in the theater. I'm like, "Oh my god, that's such a funny line." That would be the French.
And Calypso, what just a great name for this character,
And her
Just
and what
invokes
happened to
everything.
her in the third film is awesome. And
Yeah.
It's funny because actually, if we want to bring that up to talk about Mandalorian season 3 with the Grogu, I was like, okay, that's Pirates of the Caribbean right there. When he's
which
on
part?
when they're at the caverns for the Mandalorian, and Grogu is hanging out by the water near Meth Gator. And he's playing with the rocks.
Oh,
and,
that
I'm like, oh my god, that's Pirates 3 right there.
Yeah, I thought I did think the little rock crabs, for sure.
Yeah.
That look like rocks and turn out to be crabs. Yeah.
I was waiting for him to pick it up and lick it like like giant.
Yeah. Steals a ring.
I love the fact also that we've always wondered what we always heard Davy Jones's locker, or what that actually meant, and then seeing it like it was almost like a void, which is actually really cool. And as a being able to have a clean slate to figure out what that actually meant.
Yeah. I remember when we started seeing the artwork and the boards for that, I was like, oh wow, that's not at all what I would have. That's amazing. And also the whole trick of getting back to the real world by capsizing the ship and everything, that was super fun.
Just if you're interested, I'll quickly tell you a couple of historical stories, if you like, about pirates and seafarers in the UK. A lot of people think that pirates have an accent because it's a pirate accent. That's a Bristolian accent. It's also a Cornish accent. So people from Bristol, I think you've been there, Hal, or nearby. Was it in Bath or somewhere? You were in England. I think you remember. I remember you mentioning you were in that part of the world. Bristolians have the pirate accent, and so do people from Falmouth and Penzance in Cornwall. It's just their accent. It's a West Country accent.
Oh, interesting.
Also, really quickly, pirates don't always exist on the water. There are pirates on land. And I'll quickly tell you a story from the part of the world I'm from.
Don't forget.
I brought up in an area of West Wales called the Gower Peninsula. And so companies that were bringing precious cargo across the Irish Sea or the Atlantic would come and, miscalculate their bearings in terms of their navigation and end up in a part of West Wales where they weren't sure they were. And so what I don't know the exact term, it's cliff crashes or cliff something or other. They would extinguish the lights on the lighthouses, which weren't electric back in the day, they were flames, so that they would deliberately run aground and go down and steal the cargo. So pirates weren't always on the ocean, they're also on the land.
Interesting.
Those sneaky pirates.
Don't forget space pirates.
Yeah,
that's right.
Those are the best kind.
They're still pirates, but they did their bidding on land rather than just on the ocean as well. So
and just talk about those space pirates, and we saw quite a bit of them in season 3.
We almost got 2 sets though.
Pizza the Hut.
It was very interesting seeing the like the major Disney influences of the pirates per se, because you had Shard, but then you had his little Smee that looked exactly like
Smee. It totally Smee.
Which was our good friend Misty. Playing it, but that was like total and Smee right there. And then you had his little henchman around there, but that was
rag and striped shirt and everything.
It's very classic very Disney
pirates cartoon
with a knitted hat.
It all goes back to really classic Disney movies, and they're coming from literature and stuff way further back. But all of this reference in the ride is coming from Swiss Family Robinson and Treasure Island and all those.
Here's the Dutchman
movies.
When the Dutchman came out of the ocean like
amazing.
that.
Oh yeah.
that broken ship there was a full-size set that, as I mentioned earlier, was out in that lagoon, and we shot all night out on a thing in that movie rain, which was not miserable because it was the Caribbean, so it wasn't cold exactly, but that was a long night.
You're wet.
And those have got to be some like massive rain sprinklers just to get.
Yeah, no, it is, and it makes very fat drops, much fatter than you
They can show up on
ordinarily
screen.
have, so they really show up on screen, and so you just get soaked instantly, just instantly. It's like
It's
being under
amazing
fire.
seeing how they've the evolution of rain in cinema, going back to Singing in the Rain where it was milk.
Yeah,
to-
exactly, to read on screen, exactly so. Yeah,
Ooh,
there's our
awesome.
boys.
Yeah.
This is the first scene we did in post-production though with them. By the time we did this sequence, we'd already done the dice game and some other stuff, so we kind of knew what we were doing a little bit. This was still a challenging sequence, but it wasn't, even though it's the first scene in the film with Davey and his crew.
Exactly. And the first scene for me, and I'll remember this simply because I remember being blown away when I watched it. The first scene you see Davy Jones, his leg is underwater.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, like, that's clever. Like, you're showing somebody who's not just walking along aboard a ship. It's the first sequence is below water and above water along. That was just so clever.
Well, and
I'm
how the flame here is the reflection or lighting on the tentacles. You know, something that's just amazing.
It's tough. And I'm glad we got to do the gag here where he blows the pipe smoke out of his little
Right, yeah.
because we had that the dice game was actually longer originally, and we actually animated pretty much all of it. And by longer, I just mean there were more rounds of bidding and more dialogue. And at some point along the way, it was decided to kind of cut it down and get to the point a little faster. And so some of that stuff got jettisoned. But one of the things that got jettisoned was a really nice moment where he took a draw on his pipe and the smoke came out. And so I was really happy we got to do it in this scene because it was such a cool little detail. But he also did a thing like he has that one index finger that's a tentacle.
Yeah.
And he picked up a bunch of the dice with the suckers on his tentacle and kind of rolled them around. I was really sorry to lose that. It was a really nice piece of animation by Mark Chu. Really good animator.
He's got a very similar look in the facial elements to Vane, except for the tentacles.
Yeah.
With that, lack of nose kind of thing. Very
right. Yeah.
Like
there you see our tentacle simulation in full flower there.
That was funny because when Marty was walking the floor at Celebration, no one really knew what he looked like outside of Vane makeup. So he was walking the floor with actually a Vane t-shirt, and he was like posting pictures like, I'm just walking free and no one knows.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows what he looks like. We did some makeup on Bill around his eyes. If you see behind the scenes stuff, you'll see some kind of greenish textured makeup around his eyes and some dots on his face, because we just weren't 100% sure that our CG character would hold up in really tight close-ups, and we wanted to give ourselves a kind of backup plan where we might keep his real eyes and do a blend to the CG. But we didn't end up doing that in any of the shots. All the shots of Davey are 100% CG.
I love that he's looking through the lens and all of a sudden he puts it down and he's standing right in front of him.
Yeah, it's a great reveal.
But like you said earlier, he really holds up for 20 years old.
And it'd be great if we could all, those of us that worked on it, could take credit for all that. I think a huge amount of credit has to be given to Gore Verbinski. He's a director with absolutely tremendous taste, and he can really point you in the direction when he feels something is off. He doesn't just tell you it doesn't feel right and go fix it. He's very articulate about it. Crash McCreary, who was key in designing Davy Jones, and Jim Burkett, actually, our art directors on our end. And then just a bunch of kind of lucky kind of stuff. Like I think there's something about the translucent octopus skin that we could do very well then. We could do that then better than we could do just straight up realistic human skin.
Mhm.
And also there are just design things about him that save us a little bit of the pain of doing just a flat out straight human person, right? That's different. Everyone knows it's difficult.
He
to
was
do.
giving me
And all that, and John Knoll is from.
oh yeah.
He's our. Excuse my French. He's our. He's our best effects. He's the best effects soup I've ever worked with, and I worked with him on a bunch of stuff. And that all those things together, you know, we got to a really good place. And yeah, it's gratifying to be able to sit here and watch it and not kind of go, you know,
Yeah.
it's good for its time. It's like it's nice to be able to watch it and go, looks good. I buy him.
Yeah.
I believe him as a character.
Never met him, don't know him, but I listened to John Knoll talk. Gosh, it must be about 17 years ago, and I was just encapsulated by what he had to say, and you know how to get to an end product and how he gets there. It was just fascinating to listen about. I just want to say real quick as well, the motion capture that Bill Nighy does for this, it's challenging. I mean, we all know about Andy Serkis and you know his business is technology, but fairness to Bill Nighy, who's not as young as Andy Serkis. You know, I know he's got some physical challenges. I know he's got arthritis. So this must have been tough for him to do. So, and if you have,
oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if you haven't seen, if you like Bill Nighy, you like his work, watch a movie called Pride with Bill Nighy. It's an excellent British shot movie. Shot during it's shot during the era of the coal mine strikes during the 80s.
Oh, I'll have to check it out.
Really good movie.
I really liked him in Living this year. The film he was in this year, really great, just terrific.
Everybody obviously knows him for Love Actually, but
yeah, he's tremendous. And it's funny, he would kind of jokingly, he was sort of jokingly dismayed early on because he's, you know, on set he was in these gray kind of like a mocap suit, just not as tight fitting as a normal mocap suit because we weren't doing that kind of mocap. But it was this, he called them his computer pajamas. But but then later, a little later in the production, he's like, well, yeah, but I've been talking to Bill, and Bill has to sit in the makeup chair for 6 hours, starting at, you know, 4 a.m. or whatever the crazy thing was for Bootstraps thing. And he goes, no, I don't feel so bad. I can just roll in and put on my computer pajamas and I'm ready to go.
There you go.
Yeah, I've got nothing to complain about.
Yeah.
There was some I'm always amazed like that when we go to the celebration, like we see the cosplays. Like back in 17, I talked about there was a guy in the gray pajamas with a K2 head above his head.
Yeah, I saw a picture of that.
But in London, there's a guy in a complete green suit pushing BB-8.
That's great. That's really good.
Which was pretty hilarious. People love doing those like obscure, like behind the scenes costumes as well now, which is
So this is almost classic Pirates of the Caribbean, right? It's Tortuga.
Oh, 100%. This is they're lowering the guy in the well and he's spouting the water. The mayor, I guess.
Yeah, this is basically the ride right here.
It really is. This is, we want the redhead.
Oh, that's not in there.
Oh, we want the chicken.
I know. I wonder if
movie made them
it's still
retcon
there in Tokyo.
Tortuga is
I know
very
they
much
changed it in
Yeah, I bet it
Florida
is.
and California, but I want
Tortuga is still very much like, you know, Pleasure Island from Pinocchio. You know, it's like
Yeah, for sure. The first that first week we shot at Universal, the day before the first day of shooting, we organized a big data gathering thing. We had commandeered a nearby stage and we set it up with mocap system and a scanner from this company that we do body scanning and stuff with. And we had all the actors who were playing. So we had Bill and then all the other actors who were going to play his crew come in and do all this range of motion stuff in a traditional motion capture scenario and body scans and all this other stuff that we needed for doing their digital counterparts later on. And Bill came in and I hadn't met him before and I didn't know what all conversations he had had with Gore about the character and whatnot. So I came prepared with some of the artwork, some of Crash McCreary's paintings of Davy Jones. And we had built for Bill a big plastic claw that he could use for scenes like when he picks up the little piece of cloth and looks at it, or when he grabs somebody by the neck, he could use it for stuff like that. And so I showed him the artwork and I said, I assume you're familiar with all this, but I just, I introduced myself and explained what we were doing there that day. And I showed him the claw, and he explained that he had some limitations with his hands in terms of how his fingers, capabilities with his fingers. And we said, oh, well, if this doesn't work, he said, no, let me see. And he took it and he played with it for just a few moments, and right away he was great with it and could do everything with it. And we're like, okay, great. And then I pointed out in the drawing that his right leg is a crab leg. And he looks at me completely serious. And understand, I've only known him for about 2 minutes at this point. And he says, and what do I do with my actual leg, Hal? Shove it up my ass.
British humor.
I was like, what? No. Oh, no. It's just the claws. You just walk on don't worry about the leg.
Will do.
He smiled and let me off the hook. And I was like, oh, geez, okay.
Awesome.
Good question.
He was great. He was just great. He was always game and just super easy to work with, because we hadn't done this type of on-set motion capture before. And instead of the little balls that you've seen, it was these bands that we came up with, which later became kind of an industry standard thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing it for the first time, and we hadn't entirely figured out the best way to connect them. I mean, obviously Velcro, but the bands themselves were a little stiff, and so they would kind of pop loose sometimes, and we had all these issues. So we were constantly sort of having to fuss around them a little bit, and the other players, the other Dutchman crew, and that was very stressful, because you don't want to be bothering the actors, but you need to kind of make sure you're doing this stuff right. And with the other crew, particularly when we were on Dominique, and it was action sequences, and these were stunt guys doing stuff that could be dangerous, sword fighting, and this, that, and the other, and it's stunt choreography. And they were all like, oh, what should I do if this thing pops off? We were like, ignore it. We don't want any of this to ever make you miss a cue or not duck when you're supposed to duck under a sword or any of that. Just ignore the bands. If they fall off in the middle of a take, don't worry about it. We'll scramble over and find them and put them back on you between takes, but do not worry about it. And we tried to tell Bill the same thing, but he was very conscientious about it. He was like, oh, I think one of my markers came off. And we were like,
I just read an article the other day that they were thinking about doing a mini series about the fall of Norrington.
Oh, interesting.
And what happened, like the in between?
Yeah.
What I love about how this is written, this sequence that we just watched, is how Norrington has fallen from everything that he cherishes and loves it to the antithesis of what he stands for. He's drunk, he's
great character.
Wait, here's the best place in the Oregon.
This was really tough animation.
Incredible.
Most of this was animated by Maya Kaiser, who's absolutely brilliant animator, and also now an animation supervisor at ILM, has been for quite a while now. But all that playing and the part later where he the little tear in his eye, that whole thing, which is I think in the third film. But
there's the wheel of the ship on the guy's back.
Yeah.
This guy was great. Bosun's really fun character to do. So I guess the ship's wheel was a character we already had. I was thinking he was one of the ones we added later, but you're right. He's in the original crew. But jellyfish head guy and some of the other ones, the guy with the clam shell and all that, those were ones we added.
very dark, this sequence.
I
don't mean lighting wise, I mean in terms of because it was almost, I know it sounds odd to draw parallels, but if you remember, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi was, positive, fantastic opening. We're going to put all our characters in the deepest, darkest places ever, and then they're going to win out at the end. And it felt like this in this sequence of 3. It was almost, we put the people that we love from this movie right into terrible places, and then that's, we're going to see them kind of with their spirit rise out of this terrible, terrible position they're in.
Makes him
Yeah,
play his own son, the cat of nine tails.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, guys, not Hal. You know when I say you'll get a lick of the cat, Hal, explain what that means.
That's this.
Yeah, you'll get a lash from a
Is
whip
Mike
that
in the
was
chat?
known. Oh yeah, Mike. Yeah. So a cat of nine tails is a whip that they used to use on board ships for punishment, and so a lick of the cat is that. It's a lash of the cat of nine tails.
I like Pacifico a lot. Pacifico is the guy on the right of Orlando in the shots where he's being held at that guy on the right with the coral head.
Yeah, he kind of gave me like his silhouette reminds me of Groot.
Yeah. He also reminds me in a weird way of the little guy that's with Scotty when they find him in the first of the Big Abrams thing. Kind of reminds me of
Deep
Sam
Roy
Anderson.
character.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Kat is in the chat saying she, of course, will give you a lashing. All right.
Oh dear. Okay.
We had to, it's funny, we felt like our job was to preserve Bill's and this, by the way, this is on that set in a big stage at Universal. This set was so indoors, but with rain pouring down. But that's where this whole Dutchman set was. This is where the dice game takes place. All this stuff, all that kind of thing was shot on this set. What was I going to say before that? I forget. It's just about to. It'll come to me.
You had mentioned before about being on the other side of the tram ride when you were shooting. Was it this one?
Yeah, it was actually.
I think I remember being on the tram and them saying, "Oh yeah, over here is Pirates." At least one of the sequels. It may not have been this one, but when they were doing some shots back there, and
yeah.
I think there was you talked about the mocap stuff, the digitizing the characters. I remember being on the tour one time and them pointing out a vehicle that was parked next to one of the stages that I don't know if it had the computing power or if it was the actual physical place where they would do the motion capture or whatever, but they had mentioned
might have been the scanning truck. There's a mobile thing for scanning people's bodies and everything. That's probably that.
So that was I think it was parked like adjacent to where the tram went by next to the soundstage. And I don't know if that was Gentle Giant at the time, but I thought
that's who it was.
Yeah,
it was
they mentioned it was Gentle Giant. Yeah. Actually, at Celebration 2, Gentle Giant had set up their booth with one of those motion or 3D capture scanner things.
You get yourself scanned.
Yeah, they let people get scanned, and I was actually the first one. Me and my buddy were the first two in line. So I have a digital copy. It's not, a great version of my head scan. It's actually a printout. But it was fun to do, and it was really cool to see. And if they could have gave me the like 3D file, that would have been like mind blown, especially at the time, because that was Celebration 2. So that would have been 2002.
That would have been 47 3.5-inch floppies.
John, when John Knoll was working on the special edition of New Hope, and they were redoing some of the X-Wing stuff at Yavin, particularly when the X-Wings all kind of come in close by camera and fly past before the battle starts. He had a scan of his head from somewhere that he'd gotten. I forget the story, but I want to say it was a similar kind of thing where he'd just gotten it as part of something or some demo or whatever, but he had a scan of his head and he used that for the pilots in the cockpit. So all those.
That's cool.
That's amazing.
So what is like the hardware like that you're doing all this on? Is this all still based on the Pixar computer?
Oh no. Yeah. When I started, well, it's funny. I'd have to ask somebody when we switched over, like what we were working on by the time we were doing these films. But when I started at ILM in '96, or when I was at Pixar before that, we were all working on Silicon Graphics workstations, which were very expensive,
Mhm.
not consumer-oriented machines. The software was very expensive. Everything was very expensive.
Professional workhorses.
And now, but it didn't take long. Like I would say, certainly by maybe 2006 or so, which is this era, but certainly after that, now we all have inexpensive PCs that we work on with graphics cards that are kind of expensive, but they're not so expensive that a person couldn't have one. You know, gamers have. I mean, the graphics
Yeah.
card the gamers use,
Much more
or
accessible.
Bitcoin miner nowadays.
Nvidia cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really changed, and the software is all. This the whole world
Much more
landscape of
accessible.
software is very different. You know, Maya is still expensive,
Yeah.
but not so expensive that an individual.
Yeah.
That it would be impossible for them to get it, and plus it has a learning edition, which is free.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if
Oh
you
yeah,
take
it's not
the
that it's
classes, you
accessible.
got
I
access
was
to.
using Maya in college. Is we had
Yeah.
versions of that on all the workstations.
Yeah.
So I think we were in the middle of that transition when these films were made, in terms of what artists were using at their desktops. But when I started, it was all this like high-end computing power that the
Yeah.
average mortal could not.
Yeah.
Vendor
afford.
farms.
But that all changed pretty quickly, and it changed the business really in terms of what it would cost to set up a visual effects company. You know,
Yeah.
change. Now our
Right.
render farm, that's a different thing. Like this, that's still a big room that's deeply chilled, you know, and it's just racks and racks and racks and racks and racks of servers, and what exact servers those are and all that, I couldn't tell you. Not because it's secret, just because I don't know. It's not my end of the work. But that whole thing is still very expensive to maintain. Now there's, of course, for a while now been, and I won't get too far down this, but I don't think it's probably that interesting to most of your listeners, but there are a lot of visual effects companies that now try to do most of that computing stuff in the cloud. They work with cloud
Oh, yeah.
services. for that.
Yeah.
We're hampered a little bit because of security concerns, frankly, with between Disney and Marvel and the different companies that have really locked down security. But I don't know if that's still the barrier. I know that once was a barrier. Again, I'm not really that, but I know we still have our big server room at
Well, I knew at one point a lot of like independent companies were trying to recruit people with, you know, higher end machines in their homes to set up their own networks. And, you know, at downtime at night and this and that, you just leave your machine on and you would be part of the render farm for those independent studios.
Yeah. And certainly all of our machines, whether it was back in the day when it was still in graphics or where we are now, in the studio at night, those all get glommed onto by the system, and they render frames. So, you know, if you're working late, in fact, you kind of have to opt out of that, because if you don't, if you forget to, your machine will suddenly bog down because it's now trying to render something or compute something for somebody else, and you've got to opt out of that so you can keep working. And again, this is one of those scenes where you're looking out at the real ocean with a real ship out there, and it's just awesome, you know.
Hammerhead.
The dice game. So this is the first scene we did with Davy Jones. And we launched into this scene first because we knew it would be one of the most challenging scenes. It's not all obscured with rain and smoke. We're in close on all the characters, certainly on Davy, but most of the other crew get at least medium shots, if not close-ups, and have dialogue. They even have dialogue. So we just kind of wanted to jump in the deep end first. And twins, they're so goofy. They didn't have to be quite as detailed as the other characters because we never see them much closer than this. But I love that he picks some crustacean or something off his twin and eats it, and you know, it's just great coming up with business like that.
Who got to decide like what sea creatures these crew members were based on? Was it you guys, the animators? Was it the directors? Was it somebody in storyboarding?
Initially, it was Gore and Crash working together, and Jim Burkett in the mix as well. But then our art department, and I want to call out particularly Aaron McBride, really did a lot of work on the details, things that weren't fleshed out in the initial artwork, figuring out, like you say, should we put muscles here? Should we put sea anemones? Would we want to use this? Would we want to use that? And one of the big struggles was making sure that it didn't all just turn into noise, because it's very easy with this much detail for everything to just be like just a jumble. That guy with the weird face that like that there's Bill using the plastic claw replaced with CG, of course, but we kept the real cloth in those shots. But there's a guy in here, his name is Ogilvy, who says this weird, it almost looks like he's there just to the right of Orlando. I never did figure out what his head is made of or what it's supposed to be.
Coral.
It's like coral, and it could be driftwood. Who knows what it is?
Crazy.
But yeah, it was just super fun to figure these guys out. There's a guy in there that's all seaweed. Forget what we called him.
There's one with
like the blowfish guy, and then the hammerhead, and then there's a horseshoe crab. And
there's one with an eel coming out of his abdomen. Yeah,
and he's the one we did first, actually. And I can't even remember his name, but the guy with the eel coming out, and he's got kind of a sea anemone eye.
Yeah.
Was the very first one we did. He was our test bed initially for just applying sea light. That guy to the left of Orlando there. Oh, I guess it's a sea anemone mouth, is what it is.
Oh yeah.
I can't even remember his name, but he was the very first guy we dug into. Little cabin boy with his shrimp body, and I don't know, super fun. Super fun. Clanker is the guy with the kind of wide mouth and the chains with the two balls on it that he swings around. And I can't remember all their names, but and the guy with the shell head, played by Reggie. I forget the actor's name. His name's Reggie. But it's great. He gets knocked off later, and it's a funny gag.
It's
Reggie.
Yeah, but like I said, there were a couple more rounds of this, making bets, or at least one more round, and it had an additional dialogue went with it, and we'd animated the whole thing. We hadn't gone to final render on everything, but there is somewhere a cut of this with the extra stuff in it, and it had some terrific. Because I know what I was going to say earlier, that we were using a kind of body motion capture on this, but we didn't yet have facial motion capture. So all the facial movement is animated by hand by our animators. Now, we studied Bill's face frame by frame to try and capture the performance, but it was a lot of work by the animators and a lot of interpretation. Like if Bill flared his nostrils, well, Davey doesn't have nostrils, so we'd have to find ways to kind of tweak it. But again, the whole thing was, hopefully anybody who knows Bill Nye would look at this and that's Bill Nye.
You take his mannerisms and you blend it into the character of Davy Jones. But what's cool about this is I can remember watching this vividly, going to see it and it being completely different to the first movie, but in a good way, in that you've gone from skeletons, right? You've gone from zombie skeletons to like marine zombies that have flesh and mannerisms and characteristics, which is a completely different type of outlook on on a movie. And I just remember looking at this thinking, you were focused on Davy Jones and different characters, Bootstrap and different people, but you're also drawn towards the marine creatures and Davy Jones's crew, literally because of the way they looked, the way they acted. And that was just such a wonderful thing I remember about this movie. And the back of his head as a octopus squid.
Yeah,
that's so freaky. But it's like on rewatch, you get lots of different details in all those characters. It's amazing how many different little elements you can see.
And there's a little drip of water on his little blowhole there in that shot before he wrapped. You can see it
right off right there.
This was super hard. We had we had done a full head maquette of him that Richard Miller at ILM sculpted. Richard was a fantastic sculptor. He just passed away this last year. He's a wonderful guy. And he also cast for us a set of tentacles that were rubber. And we had those dangling from Bill's face so that Orlando had something to actually interact with. And then we had to line up our CG tentacles to the rubber tentacles and then paint out the rubber tentacles where we wanted to diverge from where and it was just so difficult. It was a really, really difficult sequence, but it worked out. But I remember Gord describing it to us initially. He's like, yeah, no, he's gonna he's got a couple little sticks and he's gonna kind of lift the thing up and he's gonna get the thing out and put the cloth in there. And we were like,
yeah.
Oh man.
Well, and the great thing about
the tentacles are not going to be passive; they're going to be active. As he takes the little stick in his mouth, it's going to grab onto it.
Grab onto it. Yeah.
Well, and this whole sequence is also rocking as well. Either the camera or the gimbal or whatever it's on. You get that notice.
Yep. He escapes. Oh, we're coming.
I assume you had to make. You're talking about earlier. There's like 3 shots of it with the guy in the suit and then the air and whatever. Is you've got some fairly sophisticated like camera controls that you have to build as well, so you can duplicate that motion for the 3 shots.
Nope. Now those shot when we were on the first film, when we were doing that mode where we were shooting things like in 3 passes. It was just a really skilled camera operators trying to kind of make sure they do the same thing each time. And of course, they don't do it exactly the same, but it's close enough for the kind of work we were doing. It was better that than to slow the production down with motion control camera. When you're doing an effect that depends on shooting a scene twice with exactly the same camera move, then you use a motion control camera, and it's a track and a dolly and everything that's all motorized, and you can operate it and then have it perform the exact same move over again, like a robot, like one of those car building robots, for instance, with a camera on the end instead. But that can slow down production. And we knew we had so much work to do on the first Pirates with all the skeleton fighting stuff that was going to be a no-go. So we just relied on really good camera operators to try and kind of do the same move each time. And that got us in the ballpark for it.
Wow.
So that's the real pearl that they built on top of the ship. We might have had to have added sails to that. I didn't quite see how wide we were at the beginning of the shot, but that's an actual ship at sea. It's not a real sailing ship. It's motorized. It's got a propeller and an engine. But stuff like this, it's great. They just can go out. They could go out and shoot it, and it didn't demand us patching in or painting out tugboats or stuff that you might have if you had to shoot this at shore. And it's really at sea, which is great. I wonder if any of the actors struggled with seasickness. Hopefully not. I can't imagine how awful that would be to be cast in a film like this and then find out that you're just deathly seasick. Oh, that would just be the worst.
So how we talked, or you were talking earlier about like Jaws, and I mean, I think it's fairly legendary that Jaws the movie works well on a lot of ways because of what didn't work with the shark and the animatronic and what they couldn't do. Is there anything in these movies that didn't work the way you wanted it to, and it had to be done another way that made it better?
I can't think of anything really singular like that. Like, oh, we had a total plan to do this, and then it failed, and we ended up doing this instead, and it was awesome because of that. I don't think there's a really good example of that in these films. There are things that never go quite as planned, and then you have to kind of repair them or fix them later on. But there wasn't, I don't recall a thing like, oh yeah, we built this whole rig to have a ship do this specific thing and it just completely failed. But you know what? The sequence is better for it because we did this instead. I can't think of a case quite like that because I know exactly what you're talking about with Jaws.
Yes.
You forced Steven to keep the shark out of view most of the time and ended up benefiting the film and making it more mysterious.
He I think it's well discussed that he used the Alfred Hitchcock sequence. It's what you don't see, you can be afraid of, and what you don't see is mysterious. And so he relied on that old technique of not being able to see something that's scary.
And it's always a good idea to let your audience do some of the heavy lifting in terms of things being scary or mysterious or whatever. Let them imagine, they've got an awesome imagination. Let them do some of the work instead of just showing it to them. Not always, but often that's a good way of action.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I hope to goodness, that never, ever, ever in the world is Jaws like rebooted or remade, because they'd show us everything. And no.
Well, it's called Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah, you can't beat "Let's Drink to Our Legs." You can't beat that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's the claw you were talking about with Bill Nighy.
And I love that we became unafraid to just let him come right into camera like this. That was, we're very nervous about that when we started into the, like, oh, I love this capstan thing to call it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
Because if you think about it, again, another thing. Prior to the Pirates of the Caribbean, we've all heard about the legend of Davy Jones and what it means and Davy Jones's locker, but this really kind of takes that myth and brings it out and explains it, right? This is how we interpret Davy Jones. This is how we take the legend and bring it to I don't know, the public persona and how it's interpreted.
Yeah.
That's brave. That's hard to do. You take a legend that not a lot of people know too much about in detail and bring it out into a movie like this.
I love this shot coming up where the captain gets yanked off the deck.
Yeah.
Classic. So what's the Errol Flynn? Is it Captain Blood, where he goes down the sail with the knife?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with a knife through the sail.
The Seahawk, one of those. This is
Earl Flynn. Too.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of fun with this because this was, obviously Davey was a great challenge and a great opportunity to partner with Bill, but of course it also meant that we were building on his performance. The Kraken was fun because we got to just animate stuff. Scary tentacles waving around and crushing things.
So one of my abiding memories about the Kraken sequence is there was a couple sat behind my wife and I while we were watching this, and she nudged her husband or boyfriend and said, "See, this is why we don't go on cruises." laughing about it.
This was a crazy stunt. That jump across there. And they also, at the moment when the Kraken splits the ship in half, that was a full-size gag they built. They built this whole deck. It was in that same lagoon at Grand Bahama. And they had these two blue metal cylinders filled with concrete that fell on the deck and smashed it in half, and the two ends went up.
Wow.
And then we had to do we had to add the sails and a bunch of other stuff to those shots, but it was like this bit right here.
This is insane.
Yeah, but the fact that any part of that is practical is surprising and amazing.
Yeah.
But that level shot, that's all full size. That wide shot.
Oh my goodness!
I mean, we obviously had the Kraken and a bunch of other stuff. But, it was amazing to see that all full size, and they got great plates from it. It just really gave us a great foundation to build on top of. And we get one little glimpse at the. That's another crazy stunt, jumping off that mast going down, and we get one little glimpse at most of the creature. Briefly.
Similar to the creature that was in second season of Mandalorian in that ship's hold. More kind of pirate references. Similar to the much smaller version of the creature that went after Grogu in the ship's hold of that second season of Mandalorian.
Yep. The Dutchman again. That's the full size build that they built out and could take out in the ocean.
Now, real quick, because I mentioned it about some of the seafaring history of my family. Not that I can speak from experience, but it has been described from generations how tragedy happens on ocean, and you see the floating sequences of debris from shipwrecks. That's very true. It doesn't sink typically; it floats to the surface because it's air-based. So you see a lot of pretty graphic stuff if there's been a tragedy at sea.
I am the sea. Is that like the Pirates equivalent of I am the Senate?
And by the way, just really quickly, big shout out to my wife, Caroline, who's working really hard for Disney right now. who once famously said to me, I don't want to go see Titanic, the movie, because I know what happens in the end.
And it takes forever to get there. It's so long now.
Yeah, 2 VHS tapes.
VHS
man.
tape.
But who has bravely agreed to come and see the 40th anniversary edition of Return of the Jedi with me tomorrow. So,
Nice.
Now, did she go to see Rogue One because she knew the ending, though?
Ooh.
she went to see Rogue One because I insisted she see it. But I had seen it previously, and I said, you have to come and watch this because she grew up with Star Wars just like me. And I said, you must see this movie. Don't ignore it. Don't watch it on VHS, DVD, or whatever it was at the time.
I'll be right back. Just give me
All right.
I'll be right back.
We'll be
Keep
here.
going. Nobody pause. Just keep going.
Okay.
See, I had a benevolent agenda when I was asking that question. So,
Of course.
so
It's got rum.
I'm going to wait till Hal comes back about something that Spencer and I say to each other that's based on this movie. But probably one of my favorite all-time sequences, don't want to be a spoiler alert, but the watermill. That sequence of this movie is just mind-blowing. It's funny. It's you just can't figure out what's going on and how the sequence of favor changes from person to person is just incredible. But yeah, I just reiterating what I said to Hal earlier on. I've been lucky enough to be in Grand Bahama Island just after the production of this on 2 different occasions, and seeing stuff it was a real treat. It was very rare to see.
Nick Valley.
Hmm?
So
Oh no. That was on a anniversary cruise. So Grand Bahama Island is in the Bahamas, whereas Nick lives in Saint Martin, which is in the Caribbean, a bit further south than Grand Bahama Island. So no, it wasn't during the same time frame. I think we were out in Grand Bahama 2004-ish, 5 maybe, just after they shot these 2 movies. And then, it was 2016, I think we were out when I met Nick. But here's a parallel again. Stellan Skarsgård, I think is the way to pronounce it, is both in Andor and in
With this
Dead
makeup
Man's
on, he looks in this movie, he looks as old as he is now.
Yeah.
What are we watching? Oh, I know.
I was waiting for you to come back to tell you that little private joke, Spencer and I, whenever we're thinking about something or confused or don't know what to do, and we look at each other or text each other and go, but why is the rum always gone?
Great line. I also love the I've got a jar of dirt.
Sure.
It's so great. Yeah, a lot of good lines from these films for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like Spot.
His face.
I actually had a lot of people when I got so I got my jar of sand signed by Hayden.
Awesome.
A lot of people thought that I was actually going with a jar of dirt instead. Like, I can see the parallel, but no.
Did you write I hate sand on it?
No, at that time he was not doing he was not doing quotes. But it's ironic that you actually say that because I'm actually wearing a shirt that says I don't like sand.
So this is the sequence I was going to ask Hal about. I mean, we're not quite there yet, but this is what I remember when, I'm not saying this sequence was shot in Grand Bahama Island, but if you look at the ocean, it's very blue.
There's a couple places. I don't remember exactly where this big shell of sandy thing is. I know they shot on Grand Bahama Island because I was there. But they also shot at a place called Great Exuma or Great Exuma, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. That was for some of this stuff. Like is it in the 3rd film, I think, where they meet Davy and he's like standing in a bucket of water and they're in this little spit of sand out. to
Like a
parlay.
sandbar. Like a sandbar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Exuma. And I think this could be too, but I could be wrong. I may be completely wrong. I wasn't there for this shooting.
Yeah.
Um,
But
so
I
it could be
remember.
part of Grand
Catherine
Muhammad.
Cook
Yeah.
says it's in the
So,
Exumas.
I
and,
remember
you know,
walking along
actual
little
things.
sequences of the beach and seeing the shallows being very, very blue. And it's not a bad environmental thing, but somebody explained to me that they'd been using something to make the water appear more
Oh, huh.
blue, clear, whatever it was in
Yeah.
the shooting sequences.
Huh. Yeah,
And
I was-
this when it submarines down.
oh
um,
yeah. So actually, we built a sort of simplified steel version of the Dutchman at like, I don't know, half scale or something, which is still quite big. It's like the size of a cabin cruiser, but
Yeah.
not a whole sailing ship that could be driven down under the water. And that was just to get the interactive water. Then we had to kind of match that with the CG ship, but really tricky, complicated shot to do. This whole bit, this just gets so lunatic. The whole, particularly once they start fighting around the mill and then the wheel breaks loose. And
Oh, this
stuff.
I don't want to get ahead of this, but the whole sequence through the mill is one of my literally top 5 movie favorite moments, because
It's a
it
great
just
sword fight. It's just super fun.
So ridiculous.
it's funny, ridiculous. The sequence of favor changes between who's got the key, who hasn't got the key. It's just one of those moments where it's so much going on, you just can't help laughing and smiling and cheering at the same time.
I love the design of the chest. I also like that when they finally open it and you see it, it's just completely prosaic. Like, it's just a human heart. It's beating. It's still wet. It's not decaying, but it's not magical. There's no
Yeah.
mist that comes out,
Grossness.
and you just open it and it's just a soggy heart in there. Like, I like how kind of gross and just like straightforward that was when they got to it. And even later when Norrington brings the heart to back, and he's just got it like wrapped in like a soaking piece of cloth, and it's like really, it's like Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. It's like, have you seen that film? It's just gross. It's really great.
I like that. What?
Yeah. and her frustration, like they all run off fighting, and she's just like, she's just happy. She is done. It's really great. We'll get our standoff here shortly. Orlando, really nice guy. We the night that we won the Oscar, my wife and I, we went to Charlie Gibson, the guy I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He was fortunate to win the Oscar previously for Babe, actually, and some years earlier. And so he said, look, if we win, when we're all done with the ceremony and all that, tell your driver, because Disney very kindly provides you with a driver and a car for the evening. So tell your driver to take you to one of the Oscar parties. And so we'd heard of the Vanity Fair party, and that was a good party. And so we asked him, and he said, sure. And he took us, and we didn't have an invite, but we had an Oscar. And so they let us in. Very nice.
Bit of
automatic
yes.
And it was just a great evening. Like, it was just magical. It's fantastic. Anyways, but quite late in the evening, I happened to see Orlando strolling through, and I waved at him, and he came over, and he was just so great. Like, he was like, oh my God, he said, I'm so glad we won something. We deserved a lot more, but I'm so glad you guys won, and gave me a big hug. And, it was just great. And it's not even like I know him well.
Right.
We barely ever spoke to each other on set. There wasn't much call for it. He's not a CG character, there wasn't much to do, but he was just so great, like so genuine and nice.
Yeah.
Just a great guy.
You have an invitation? No.
Recognize
Do you know
the
my
thing.
friend Oscar?
What's that?
It's like, do you have an invitation? No, but do you know my friend Oscar?
Yeah.
Right.
It was great. We drove up, and this was back when it was at Morton's, and so for a couple blocks out on the main street there, the traffic was blocked off, and LA cops out there working overtime doing evening security. And we get to the first checkpoint, and the guy says, do you have because the driver's supposed to have a card in their window if you have a
Right.
And he didn't, and he said, no, but we got a winner in the back seat. And I rolled the window down, and the cop looks at me and he goes, all right, go ahead. And I thought, well, that doesn't seem very. I thought they're going to turn us away. They're going to turn us away.
Right.
So then we got up to the venue proper, and by the time you get there are people who work for the event or for Vanity Fair or whatever with like headsets and clipboards and all this, and they're running around. And again, they come to the car and they're like, you don't have a drive-in. And the guy's like, oh, but we've got a winner in the back seat, and show them the thing. And they were great. They were just like, oh, thank you very much. What's your name? What did you win? And they write it down, and they're like, thank you so much for coming to our party. And they open the door and they usher you in, and it was great. It's just super fun. Super fun.
Yeah.
The highlight of the
winners
was that Peter O'Toole was nominated that year. He didn't win, sadly, but he was nominated, and he was there at the Vanity Fair party, and I got a picture with him, and he was just as sweet as can be. He was the nicest guy. And then way later in the evening, like 2:00 in the morning, I see him out there just cutting a rug, some young thing dancing up a storm, and I was like, holy cow, my hero.
Well.
I love that reveal out of the surf there. That was amazing.
Yeah.
That was really hard to do.
Just dripping off their faces.
Yeah, we
Just
shot
them
the
coming up
guys
out.
actually coming out of the water, and
Yeah.
convinced ourselves we'd be able to match our guys in with the drips and everything. It was really hard to do, but I'm glad. Thank you for calling
Came
that
out
out.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tough.
it was amazing. I mean, especially in full daylight, like the shots you were talking about earlier with the smoke in the darkness, that kind of stuff. It's easier to hide that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And having it full daylight with all the blue water around is just
Yeah. It's
looked
really
amazing.
challenging to get the
It
lighting
felt
right.
natural. It felt natural, not like a forced effect. Like it didn't look like guys in rubber suits. It looked like creatures coming out of the ocean that were just very, very aquatic based.
And again, I got to tip my hat to both John Knoll and Gore both. They're just. I remember the first thing John said to me about Gore was that he's got a really great sense of taste. He's got a great eye, and that is just borne out over and over again on all the these 3 films, Rango, everything I've worked with Gore on. He really is. Not only does he have a great eye, but he's very articulate about what he's saying and what he wants, which is. You can't ask for more, but he's also collaborative. He's not completely autocratic about it, which is great.
They say that great people like Gore, people like you, Hal, you learn a lot from working with different people, right? You get experiences, good experiences, and learn a lot from different people. And I'm sure he's one of them, right? It's like I take a value or some experience of working with somebody, and I'll take that forward into all the work that I have going forward.
Well,
That's
ILM is great
a
for
positive
that,
experience. Yeah,
because ILM is a very low ego place, and people there share readily their knowledge and everything, and it's also a place where I often feel like I'm the dumbest person in the room, and that's great. That's awesome. I love that, because I feel like I can learn from everyone there. Or maybe I am just the dumbest person in the room. But it's a really low ego, because like any industry, particularly if you're at a sort of higher end of it and all that, you could expect competition and people sort of guarding their little special sauce and techniques that they learned. And that's never been a culture at ILM. It's always been a culture of sharing and just like, oh, you need help with that? What are you trying to do? Yeah, I've got to see.
that's
This
wonderful.
is an amazing gag.
That's
right?
wonderful.
Yeah, I know.
Who thought of that? Who thought of rolling the wheel over the grave?
That's Jim and Gore, and maybe Ted and Terry too. I mean, it must be said that there was a great script, and Ted and Terry did wonders with it. But I think a lot of this lunacy with these stunts and the idea of the wheel and all that had to come from Jim and Gore, and Crash too, I think. But Jim and Gore really, particularly with his kinetic stuff, I think Jim boarded a lot of it, and he and Gore just like dreamed it up. This Coconut Grove.
Look at them looking.
I had to be there because the Davies crew chases him through a little bit later in this Coconut Grove, and they had hired a guy to climb up into all these trees, and it's amazing to watch him go up these palms because they're just vertical. And he'd go right up there and he'd cut the coconuts down, because if a coconut fell, it'd kill you. They're big, they're huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're out there shooting these scenes, and I'm manning one of our little, what we call iMocap instead of mocap, because we needed to differentiate it. I'm manning one of those cameras, and in the middle of one of these takes, one of these shots of the guys running through here, and I'm running the camera, and I hear this, thump, and the shot finishes, and they call cut, and I look up, and this coconut is 2 feet away from me, and I look over, and there's another crew member, and he was like, like you are like you almost bought it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Those
Never
things
after
are
that,
no.
Before I set up my camera, I was like checking them out. Did they
So-
Yeah, double
So,
check.
so question, how do they do that where the wheel is static, it's turning, but it's not pivoting the camera? Does that make sense?
There's a whole
almost
rigid linkage, and it's
Right.
quite a wide lens. So the camera's not as far away from the wheel as it might seem, but still, there's a whole outward section with the camera mounted on it so that they can turn together. The camera and wheel turn together. And then all of the connective stuff has to be painted out. Now, nowadays, you can buy one of those little cameras on the end of a pole that does the 360 viewing that paints the pole out for you automatically. But back then, we had to do it by hand. That's kind of similar.
It's the ultimate wheel, hamster in a wheel.
Totally.
There's so many gags in the sequence. It's incredible. You know, where the two of them, where Kira and the two guys look at the wheel going past, and there's Johnny running after it
So
to the point where they give the swords to her because they have to run away.
that shot of the chest landing in the grass, I'll talk about this just a second. But also, this whole gag of this was in the plans for a while, that he would get his head knocked off and be struggling with it. But the thing later where his face sucks in and he comes out like a hermit crab and crawls away, that was a really late addition. That was a brainstorm in the jungle. The fever, it was this jungle fever dream, of course. And I still have the napkin that he drew the thing on, like the idea shell and the thing. He's like, and so we had to come up with that kind of late in the process. This, okay, now we're doing a crab that has to come out and all this stuff. But it was really fun. But the thing I was going to say about that shot of it's just an insert shot, right? The chest landing in the grass. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But when we were shooting in this grove, like same thing happens in Hawaii. There's constantly clouds passing in front of the sun, even on beautiful, brilliant days. It's never just sunny all day long. There's times when there's clouds just moving across. And then we were having that problem shooting some of those scenes in that grove where we kept losing the sun and we'd all have to pause. And so they'd look for other things they could shoot. They could just keep busy. Like, what can we do? And I remember at one point they were like, well, let's go shoot this insert of the chest landing on the ground. Now that's the kind of thing that on any other film would be second unit. Some other person would tackle that. The director might look at the dailies the next day and say, yeah, that's fine. Let's go with this take, whatever. No, here's Gore not only directing it, but he's literally throwing the chest on the ground each take from off camera. He's doing it himself.
Just right.
So it's just that might make him sound like a control freak. It's not. He's just invested in every detail. And if he can be doing it, he'll do it. You know. And
we all have to jump into the trenches at some point. And
exactly.
Oh, when the wheel falls over, they can't get up off the floor.
Yeah. It's funny. It almost makes me queasy just to think of this when I see those guys get out of it and be all dizzy, because I know I would not just be dizzy. I would be heaving,
tossing.
I would have already lost my lunch a few times.
This is all fun. Just all the, like you were saying before, all the changes in fortune across all these moments, and the little, like, does he take it? What does he do? Always looking at the jar of dirt, which of course we see that payoff later, and all this stuff, and it's just great. And then
go for the swords. Oh no, we give them away too.
We did. People are, it's been a thing for a long time at ILM when people have a moment, which is not as often as we'd like. They'll do like kind of gag versions of their shots, and so that shot earlier where the wheel passes by some of them, and they kind of watch it go by, and we pan with, we see it rolling off in the distance. Someone did a version of that where instead of the wheel, it was a Krispy Kreme donut rolling. And then somebody else did a shot of Kira with 2 lightsabers instead of the lightsabers.
Awesome.
Those are around somewhere. Those still exist somewhere.
Standoff. Oh, dropped it. This is what you're saying. Some of the barnacles are physical and some of them are moving. Oh, wow. Such a good.
Reggie, he was great.
Hmm.
He gave us a lot to work with in terms of, because we had to animate this face by hand, but his performance was really great.
He was in
I
three.
will prize it from your dead cold hand.
Yeah, he is in 3. He is in 3. He gets to actually be a live character.
Ooh.
Yeah, this bit. This was like, hey, you know what we should do at the end of this? Let's do this. And we were like, oh, okay.
He gets left behind. Yeah, he's got to figure out how to.
Turn his head into a
And
like
how
a
all
hermit,
that fits
hermit
inside
crab.
that shell, I don't know. It's
Freaky deaky.
I met Kevin at Pensacon back in May, I think. No, not May. When was it? February. He was great.
Kevin McNally, this guy.
Yeah.
He's really a nice guy.
Yeah.
I had again, he's on set. Unless I have like with Bill, I had plenty of reason to chat with Bill at various times about the work, and that might lead to other conversations. But with the other actors, I try to steer clear. I figure they're trying to remember the lines.
Good job. Yeah.
But he was a very approachable and chatty and nice fella. I remember having some nice conversations with him on Dominica and stuff. And just a really nice guy, really interesting to talk to. Good job, dude. That fall down the stairs is great. And Kira's reaction.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oops.
They're like, he's gone. He's lost it. He has lost the plot completely. That was all practical, the cannons and the hatches and all that. That was all part of the full-size build of the Dutchman, as well as the rotating guns on the front. I think I have to watch those shots again. I might be wrong. The rotating guns, maybe we added, but I'll have to wait when we get there.
And again, we didn't get time because we had a lot of our plate in London. But if you are in the UK, go and see the Cutty Sark. Go to Falmouth. Go to the various ports. Whether it's Plymouth or Southampton, you'll see this stuff. The proper original.
What's the one close to the globe? Is it the Golden Highway or the?
No, the Cutty Sark.
That is a Cutty Sark that's close to the globe?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been to that. Oh, no, those are practical. Those cannons, those rotating cannons, those are practical. But yeah, I've been to that. But here's the thing. I loved it. I love England. I've been to London a ton of times, but almost only London. That's the sad part. As far let's see, how far afield have I gotten? I've been down to Brighton, and I've been up to Bovingdon for shooting on Rogue One, up to Pinewood on the in the west. And that's about it. And that's sad. So there's so much more to see, and I'm dying to visit.
Yeah,
every other inch of that land, and I want to go to Scotland too, and Ireland. I've never been to. I've been to Dublin for a few days.
Yeah, if you do the south coast, which is we think hang on, west of Brighton, then you'll get to all the the main seafaring ports of the UK, and you'll be able to go and see where Sir Francis Drake played bowls before going into action, and various ships from this era.
Well, and even just close in, I've promised myself that the next time I'm there, I'm going to make time to at least just go up to Greenwich. I haven't even done that. And that's a great, in terms of maritime history and all that.
The college there. I walked one of the nights I was there early. I walked around that area, and it was absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah, waving my old white dude cred card here. I'm actually just now embarking on a second reading of the Master and Commander books. I'm almost read them all. I'm now almost finished with the first one. I'm going to then move on.
If there's one thing I can if you ever get, if you're ever in the area and get time, go to Portsmouth and then go see the Mary Rose artifact or the exhibition, which is what, they raised from the English Channel, which is Henry Tudor's battleship. That's incredible.
I'd love to see that. I would love to see that. This is all, the below deck stuff is all, whichever. It's Disney or Disney or Universal. I forget which lot this was on. The below deck stuff. The above deck stuff was shot at sea. There's our CG tentacles with suction cups. That was a super fun shot. There's something kind of obscene about that I really like. Like it's sort of weird and fleshy and strange. The tentacles were great fun to do. Tentacles are notoriously hard to animate because there isn't a strict hierarchy. Like people have a hierarchy. You start with the hips and everything emanates from there. But a tentacle is just one long thing and you could be moving any part of it, especially because you have to choose, is it like a snake where the head is leading? But with a tentacle, there's no head. So what's leading and what's motivating all the motion? So it gets very tricky, not just how you animate it, but how you rig it, with the controls you give to the animators to move it. It's very tough. But I was really, James Tooley again, he's absolutely brilliant. He's been probably our most senior creature rigging person at ILM for many, many years. And he wrote all our tentacle tools for these films. Brilliant guy, absolutely brilliant guy.
I don't think, without getting in too granular about it, but you mentioned tentacles. It's something that you want to represent as being, creepy, odd looking, fascinating because it's scary, but then there must be a conflict between what looks natural as a tentacle and what you want it to depict, in a sequence of a movie that might not seem quite natural, but
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's always a lot of things that are sometimes in concert with one another. Oh, by the way, some of Davy Jones' crew are amongst the Pearl crew in these sequences. Like the actors that played them, that they got turned into Pacifico, all those other characters can be seen. Their faces can be seen in some of these. But no, you're absolutely right. There's always this tug of war between things where, between realism and drama and creepiness and what does an octopus do? And, like there's all those things. It's like a whole cocktail of things. And you're trying to like balance out the ingredients to get kind of exactly the right feel. Plus scale is tough because all the reference we had for octopuses are tiny little creatures compared to this. And so
they are
nothing to look at and go, oh, well, that's how a 60-ton tentacle would move. It's like,
and moreover, how does a tentacle look violent? You study octopuses, they don't. They just move around slowly in the ocean.
And they're very soft and sensitive, actually. They're not violent like this, at least not generally. Yeah, this stuff was fun to do.
Looks very much like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah. Which is a favorite of mine.
That body folding.
Yeah.
That's just that stuff that must have liked you guys. People in the audience just go, oh.
And it's it must be said when you're working on a Disney film. It's always fun when you're sort of like pushing those those kind of limits. It's like, well, it's not gruesome technically. There's no blood and guts, but it's kind of awful.
It's your imagination thinking, what's just about to happen?
Well, it's like a lot of times when I talk about like the stuff we're watching Mandalorian and we get they're stabbing with like the dark saber or something of that nature. We're all like, well, there's no blood because it's probably because it's Disney, so that we're imagining like, oh, it's cauterized. Okay, got it.
Oh, that definitely helps. There's also things like, droid violence. We can kind of do what we want, or even in some cases, sort of alien violence. It's like within limits, we can be a little more, violent, than just human on human. But we're always trying to be sensitive about it. I'll be honest, John and Dave are not keen on violence, neither one of them. And I know I'm sort of speaking for them, maybe out of turn, but that's just my sense of having worked with them. They're not keen.
You just watched season 3 that had a ridiculous battle in it.
Yes,
But-
but like Star Wars battles where they're kind of like flying around with jetpacks and it is violent, depending on your perspective on that. But it's they're mindful of that stuff. They don't. Neither one of them is keen to put sort of negativity out in the world. I would say
Yeah.
so.
There's levels of violence that are
This is the.
acceptable and acceptable. Yeah.
By the way, this is the. It's only funny if the fear is real. That there where they chop the
Right.
tentacle.
Oh yeah. Well, and you're talking about the battle in season 3 we compare that to the Scarface, say hello to my friend, and it's the same kind of thing happening, but Scarface is just gory.
Yes.
Whereas in The Mandalorian, it's more action violence.
And it must be said, of course,
Iconic shot.
Disney would never let us do something like that.
Right.
But I think even before it gets to that point, that's just not John and Dave's sensibility. They never want to. They're mindful of the fact that there's a kid that's part of the action. It's like and I don't know. That's just not their deal. But within that, John likes to have big creature sequences, and those are scary and dangerous, and people get eaten and stuff like that. But it's in a fantasy context and all that. So and there's lots of now calamari for everyone to eat.
I can't wait till they finally release Deadpool 3 to see what boundaries of the blood and all that's going to happen, and they're going to allow through that.
Even the sense of humor. I'm curious too.
Oh yeah.
I have no inside track on that. I'm part of the Disney organization, but I have no clue. But I'm curious too. I'm interested to know how they might modify that to suit whatever. But yeah.
No, it's gonna be very.
Well, I think you would have a vested interest to know what envelope you will be pushing next when you're working with someone who may be doing.
Yeah, although I would say, yes, in terms of things that are Disney properties, but one of the things that Disney was very smart about when they bought Lucasfilm, because the history of visual effects companies, or the highway of whatever, is littered with bad examples where studios bought a visual effects company to make them their sort of in-house unit, and then later went, "Oh, visual effects are expensive, and we don't make a lot of money on that. Let's not do that anymore." And then they killed it. And so, if you go back all the way back to the 70s and 80s, there were a bunch of visual effects companies that got bought by studios, run for a little while, and then killed. And I'll be honest, when George sold the company to Disney, I worried about that. Or when the announcement was made, I worried about that. But they were smart. They let us continue to do what we do. In other words, we work on Paramount films. We work on, Fox is now Disney, but we work on Universal films. We work on not just Disney, Marvel, etc., Lucasfilm projects. So because of that, and because they've maintained that sort of thing, I don't worry about it too much. I mean, sure, if it's a Star Wars or Marvel or whatever, there are always going to be discussions about content and what they deem is appropriate and whatnot, and that's just part of it. That's part and parcel to just working in movies. But if we're working on something for one of the other studios, that's unaffected. I would say it's funny. There's been I don't know if I could ever get anybody on the record to say this, but I feel like there has always been a weird kind of just accepted, I don't know what it is, like just thing about ILM amongst like how the studio is managed, that we don't work on really super gross, violent, hard edge stuff. And I don't know if that's an actual dictum that anyone has ever put in place, but we just are not, we're not the studio that's like, yeah, with ILM working on Human Centipede. That's just not us. That's never been us.
I would
There's
think
no-
you're in a really good position to choose what you work on and what you don't work on. Whereas,
Yeah,
there's
that's part of it.
studios doing
We're lucky in that way that we, kind of ascended to a certain level in terms of brand early on, that we have some amount of, ability to say, maybe not that project, but maybe this project. Not entirely. I mean, it's a tough, visual effects is a tough market. Anyways, your audience probably just want to hear about this. But still, I've noticed over the years that that's almost never our thing. We just, but speaking of gross and
Yeah.
I know.
Interesting.
this was super fun.
Levels.
And it's a sandworm. It's like a bunch of things. That you can point to as sort of creature tropes.
Yeah, it's a
They're
Sarlacc.
so much fun to do.
Sarlacc.
And the
Sarlacc pit, yeah.
mucus on Johnny, what a trooper. Like, I mean, my God, it's disgusting.
Well, it's gonna be interesting to see what talk about that. The kill counts and the blood and the gore, or whatever they're gonna have between, Deadpool and Wolverine, having Hugh join the cast. It's gonna be quite interesting.
But I'll be honest, what I'm much more interested in, I love this when he dives in
Yeah,
there.
this is classic.
They're great. And I loved seeing this with a live audience when it came out, because nobody was expecting Jack to die. Nobody. And of course he doesn't die,
Yeah.
in this moment. And it was similar actually years later to seeing Rogue One with a real audience on opening weekend. Because as characters started to die and people started to kind of twig that, this is not going our way. Chirrut and Baze die, K2 dies, one by one. Poor Bodhi is first up, but just one by one, the characters get axed. And then, finally Jin and Cassian on the beach, and people are just like, what the F? Like, I don't know if I'm, is this my Star Wars? Like, it was really interesting to experience that in the theater. And this was kind of similar. Like when Jack got swallowed, people were like, wait, what? What now? What are you, this is only the second film. What are you doing? It was just awesome. I really enjoyed that.
The main character's gone. The Pearl's gone. Significantly, the Pearl's gone.
Yeah. No, it's huge. It's like, what are you doing? This fun.
Is what I said. This is
it's like destroying the Razor Crest and then crushing the Darksaber. It's like,
yeah. Well, that was fun. I was online at midnight, the night of the what was that episode called? The tragedy.
yeah.
And everyone's like, the tragedy. What's gonna? Is the baby gonna be okay? Whatever. And then you get to the end, Razor Crest, boom, and people are just like, whoa.
Especially since most people spend $500 a week before on a Razor Crest from HasLab. So
How ironic.
I was shortly after I was online making jokes about, that Lego Razor Crest you bought that you haven't put together yet. Well, now it's screen accurate. Just dump the pieces out on the floor. This is great. This scene's so good. Norrington.
Yeah.
And then he just dumps this gross oil-soaked napkin on. Beating hard in it. It's so good. And the flies buzzing around.
Yeah. But this sequence was the jaw-dropping as well. At the end, I don't want to, for those of you who haven't seen it, not spoiler alert, but it's like, there is hope. There is hope.
I was on set for this whole set, Tia Dalma's shack and the swamp and everything was a big soundstage set at Disney. And this was a very, very long night. And it was a long night for all these extras.
Standing in the water.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful, beautiful scene. But I'll tell you what, that at the very end, spoilers, if anybody's watching this who's never seen this before, I can't imagine anyone else.
20-year-old movie.
Yeah. So the bit at the end where Barbossa comes down the stairs, the monkey, and he bites the apple, and the monkey does the little head tilt and all that. They had to do a bunch of takes because the monkey is not as good an actor as Jeffrey Rush, as you would expect. And he would spaz out and he might jump off in a take or do this or hide behind his head or do something. And they had to do a bunch of takes. And every single take, Jeffrey Rush would give it some little nuance that was different. some little twist on it, some little angle. It wasn't just, here's my line, it's 2:00 in the morning, because it was late.
Mm.
And I'll just, here's my line, I'll just give it again, hope the monkey does the right thing. He was on it, and every take was just a little, and I was absolutely in awe. And because I was beat. We were there, we'd been there for meetings. I didn't need to be there for this scene because there's not an animation in it. And I was there just because we'd been there for meetings, and we had to wrap up the day. And I think we had to meet after they wrapped. That's why we were all hanging out. Not all, but the VFX folks were there hanging out. And I just could not believe that guy. I'd watched him just do that take over and over. And I was like, holy crap, every time it's just beautifully, slightly different, in case later on they want to, they want to pick this take over that take. Just amazing. What a trooper. And no complaints. It wasn't like, oh, this damn monkey or whatever. It was just like, it wasn't all the monkey either. It's just, there could be something else about the take that just wasn't, they wanted to do it again. But God, it was great. Everyone was just exhausted though.
I've been super fortunate to briefly meet Jeff Rush in New York. He was in Broadway and something, might be King Lear, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I spent 2 to 3 minutes just chatting to him as he was getting in his car. And everybody thinks he's Australian. He's not. He's New Zealand.
Oh, is he really? I didn't
He's
know.
New Zealander. Yeah. He's not Aussie. He's New Zealander. And just a total opposite of what his characters are typically on screen. Just a typical, all right, mate, that New Zealand accent. Talked about rugby really quickly and got in his car. But nice guy. Very professional.
Yeah, I was super knocked out.
I love her. She's my girlfriend.
There she is. I always feel for actors who have to wear contacts.
Mm.
There.
And also all that stuff in their mouth. That's
yeah.
I was thinking.
There he comes. And don't forget, there is an Easter egg on this film in the credits. I mean, and after credit bit. But this thing, and it was a great take. I mean, the little dribble after he bites, and
I was thinking with that.
Does the little head tilt and the screech. It was like, oh my God, that's the take. But that's like the 20th take or whatever. And he was great on every take, like 100% full on every take. Just amazing.
That was
that's a great.
Somehow Barbosa returned.
Yeah, right. That was just great, as well as great, gotcha moment when he takes a bite of the apple, especially since he was harboring off over a bushel of apples in the first movie. So.
Yep. It's a great callback. Absolutely.
Well, this was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Sit down and chat about this property.
Don't sign off yet. There's a post credits.
I'm just
We're still watching. I'm not going to post anything. Don't worry about it.
Honestly, it was really fun for me to revisit all this. It really was. It was great. Here we can watch for my name somewhere in the credits. I don't know where it comes up, but yeah, no, this was super fun. To be honest, I hadn't thought about a lot of this stuff in quite a while, because why would you?
Well, that was like when we were having the discussion about having you back on here, and we're like, well, let's talk about other properties and stuff. And why when you mentioned pirates, I'm like, oh, I knew our audience would be like,
oh yeah.
They really did it because they knew I'm fascinated by pirates. That's
right.
That's the whole.
Your face lit up. Your face lit up when we told you that.
Oh, it did.
Lit up. I was. Well, I couldn't describe it in pleasant company.
Plus, Stellan and Kira are both Star Wars alumni.
Oh yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. So,
well, and people over in the chat are thanking you for joining us. Hal is just saying that this movie still holds up. It really has not been surpassed in CG. It's still
incredible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And hang on, my credits just went to the tiny.
Yeah, I don't like.
I gotta.
I think mine's still.
Got the scrolling credits.
Peter Cohn, first AD. I don't know if you guys just saw that name go by.
Oh yeah,
yep.
That's up
so
on the
he
screen
was
right
on set in London for New Hope. and I don't recall
Oh,
what his role is. At the time, I don't know if he was a PA or coordinator or runner or what he did. It was a minor role, but he was there on set for New Hope in London in the
There you
day.
are, right there.
There you
are.
Animation service
Oh,
supervisor.
did I miss it? I missed it.
That's right before you
Right before the
Right
cat.
before the crawl starts. Right
Yep.
before, yeah. Pete, he showed me this great photo of himself smoking a cigarette at Pinewood, or not Pinewood, was it L Street?
L Street. Yeah.
And but if you read Carrie Fisher's Princess Diaries, the book she
Read
published
Yep.
not long before she passed, he features in that. He's, in fact, the night that she and Harrison, they
Get
left
together.
Rio and they went into
The party,
town
yeah.
and they had
Yeah.
dinner. He's with them there having dinner.
Oh, very cool.
That's right.
And-
That's
And
right.
he's the first AD on the film, and he's a wonderful guy, absolutely
Yeah.
amazing guy, great. But the funny thing is, he never mentioned any, we were around each
Yeah.
other quite a bit, lots of people, and I don't know him well, but even though the topic came up, somebody rather said to me, Pete worked on Star Wars, whatever, and he, I think he had it on his phone or something, like the photo that he showed me. It was just him on set with a cigarette in his mouth, just like looking like a punk teenager. But he didn't talk about any of the rest of that. None of the rest of that. And you would think, somebody who lived through that and
Story you lead
particularly
with.
that particular
Yeah.
little
He
thing,
he was
storyline.
he was the guy that was honking the horn at the car because he recognized them in the car.
Yeah. And,
Right, and then they ended up having dinner together. Yeah.
and you think he'd be dining out on that story for the rest of his life. He never mentioned it. I never knew it
The
until
full
years
side
later
thing
when I
of
read
Different
it.
time.
professionalism. It's like, you don't.
Different times, different
What a great
generation.
guy. He was
Yeah.
so great. I really enjoyed working with him. Oh, Martin Samuel, chief hairstylist. He was awesome. These names jump out at me. Lee, sound mixer.
Cool.
The people, there's just people you chat up on set that you get to know a little bit, just
But based on what you were saying a minute ago, Hal, what was a big treat for Spencer and I being in London, is to go back and see some of the original generation actors. I met a lot of the production crew stateside, but being in the UK, we met Ken Colley, Julian Glover, various people from your era, Andy Seacombe and Brian Herrick, all those guys that did amazing work like you, and just to bump into them and chat to them about their experiences were just amazing. It was just a rare treat. And to be honest with you, a lot of that opportunities was why I went to London, is thinking this is probably the last time I'm going to see these guys.
Have you guys had on your show? Now that I've launched down this lane of thinking, I'm blanking on his name.
John Knoll? No, we haven't.
No, so he's one of the guys that played. My brain is failing me. It's a trap.
Tim Rose.
Not Tim. Mike.
I know what you mean.
So he's done tons of puppeteering stuff. Dark Crystal, Star Wars films.
Oh,
Quinn.
Mike Quinn.
Mike Quinn. So have you guys had him on? I don't.
We've had multiple conversations with him. We actually saw him at one of the events that we were at Celebration. He knows what we do, and he's always been interested. I think that we're probably going to have him. I think we were in talks for like a speaker series, John. We were thinking
Yeah.
about that.
Yes.
I only bring it up because you were mentioning different
Yeah.
British folk work in various capacities, and when I started at ILM in '96, Mike was here's the ILM credits. Man, I know all these names.
Oh, yeah.
See, there's James Tooley, creature development supervisor. It should be a bigger credit. He was really instrumental. But Mike was an animator, a CG animator at ILM in '96, and he was just kind of delving into that then. But then he later went back to creature work and puppeteering and makeup and all that whole world. But what a great guy. And he's had all kinds of interesting intersections with the Star Wars world and other films and stuff. So
Absolutely. We'd love to, but I think the difficulty with Mike is I've had conversations with him, and I know that Spence has. It's either travel or a time zone thing, but we'll figure it out. Do you know? It's funny you should mention that. Spencer and I have talked to somebody who works closely with you, who we've nagged incessantly to come on the show in a good way. And we saw him in London, and I don't want to kind of say it live, but he has a lot of how would you describe it, Spencer? He has a lot of senior work within ILM and Lucasfilm on sound. And
I bet but talk to me offline and we'll see.
Okay.
I don't, if it's who I think it is,
Yeah.
I don't know how much sway I have, but I could put a bug here a little bit. But Mike, you know, the other thing about Mike, and I don't know him, it's been, oh, there's Charlie's name, just went by, Charlie Gibson. Mike is way more connected to the con scene and all that, and appearances and all that than I ever am. Like, you guys have no trouble getting me because I'm not hooked into all that. Like, in fact, I was thinking about, you know, joking with John coming, you know, if the, you know, coming up on future stuff with in the Manaverse, like saying, look, man, you got to get me a cameo because I need those con bucks, you know. You got to get me a cameo. Just make sure there's no lines to it because I'm not an actor. But Mike's very
we will pay for you at a con now. You don't need to get, we will pay to see you at a con now.
Nobody would line. This is great. This is awesome. You know, oh, here we go. Here's our history. I love this because, and I don't know if this was like the plan all along or somewhere through production, somebody said, hey, look, people are going to care about what happened to the dog. I don't know. I just love they did that.
That's awesome. Well, it's funny you mentioned Mike Quinn because there was an extra event on the last night of celebration called Cantina, where Mike actually jumped on stage with a band to sing the Fraggle Rock theme.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
no, he's a great guy. He's so great.
He's hilarious. We've had over the years many a conversation with him, and he's definitely he's definitely on our list. But once again, Hal, thank you so much for joining us. I know you joined us twice to talk Star Wars, but this was, I thought, it's not more of a treat to hear you talk about this. I mean, and this is the first time in a long time I watched this movie, and I'm like, wow.
Oh, it was great. Yeah.
Great trip down memory lane for everybody.
Well-deserved Oscar for this.
I put this in the background, but then I realized you guys can't see it in the background because of how the
there it is.
I was wondering when we were talking earlier, it's like, does he have the ultimate prop?
There it is.
So. Wonderful.
Very cool.
Very well deserved. And you know, the nomination also that you guys got for Rogue One was absolutely well deserved as well. Just, you know, keep on doing what you're doing. We absolutely love it. Love having you on and enjoy every time you come on to our show. And seems like a lot of our viewers, especially on the Twitter, seem to love reposting every time that you're on the show. So
good.
We appreciate that. So once again, Hal, thank you so much for joining us this evening to watch. What an incredible movie.
Thanks a lot, Spence. I really enjoy it. You guys are great. And it's super fun to just like spin out and chat about memories and then talk about loads of other stuff like Jonathan, like maritime pirate history of and you know, all this stuff. So it's great. It's super fun.
We'll definitely have to do it again.
Yep.
John, first, any notes from you?
Oh, just an amazing treat to spend time again in Hal's company, to listen to his memories, trip down memory lane of this. One of my all-time favorite movies, particularly the sequence with the wheel, just the work, incredible work. It was groundbreaking at the time when I saw this. I remember thinking, wow, this is next level stuff now with how they're doing this stuff at Disney. So rare treat for all of us. Great to hang out with you, Hal, and you're a super cool guy, and thank you for taking extended time beyond what you should normally do with us. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you very much. I mean, I learn something new every time. You know, things that I would have never thought were done that way, and then how you do it and what you're doing in the creative process. I love learning it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Jeff.
Yeah, everything you talk about is amazing to listen to. You know, the whole process and understanding the different elements that we don't normally hear about is really cool.
Yeah.
And I probably was on that tram car going by at Universal.
I think
But,
that's awesome. I love the
yeah.
idea of that. In fact, I prefer now to believe that you were on that exact tram car right when I was, because I just think that's
Exactly.
great. Particularly since you mentioned the Gentle Giant truck, which is
Yes,
key to that actual
I
moment.
definitely was. You know, we were close for sure. If it wasn't that one, you know.
Oh,
so.
and to
That's
think
awesome.
that when I was on Grand Bahama Island, you were either
Yeah,
on
there
the
you go.
island or
That's
just
right.
being around that
Near-
area doing your work. Yeah,
Near
absolutely.
misses. Like,
Yeah,
Shifts
it's
past
amazing.
the night.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yes.
Awesome.
I'm thinking of Indiana Jones right now. Yes. That you talk in your sleep. But
We are chat
so
like
we I can't wait for we saw the first we saw like an 8-minute sequence of
Dial of Destiny.
Indiana Jones
Yeah.
in London, and wow, that's going to be spectacular. Can't wait for that, and I can't wait for everything that we've heard about and are seeing, and it is just so exciting to be in there. And one of the announcements that we were actually going to make an announcement tonight about the future shirt for their virtual cantina. And I actually want to pass it over to our designer to introduce it. So Dave.
Oh, we've asked you and you let us know what we want. We've got the hockey jersey. Spencer's rocking the racer. You know, you can see some of the great detailing we have. So since you asked, we are going to debut not one, but 2 baseball jerseys, virtual Cantina baseball jerseys. We're going to do a light side, which is, going to be virtual Cantina Jedi, and the virtual Cantina Imperials. All will be available. We've got the 2 designs. There will be amazing virtual Cantina logos on it. We created a new Imperial virtual Cantina logo for this very jersey. You can buy one, you can buy both. You can have your own little baseball game at home and face off against your friends and neighbors, and wear them to cons and everywhere else. Is this one I've worn to several cons. You get great comments on it. Everybody wanting to know where you got it, and every single time we do one of these shirts, everybody comes up to us, asks, "Where can I get that? Can I order that now?" And no, you missed out, because we do these as a limited time only. And these are going to drop, Spencer, on
We're dropping on May the 4th, and also let you know that you can get not only you can get your name and choose your number for the back of your jerseys as well. And we are going to be offering kid sizes for the first time as well. So you got your Padawans out there, or for your foundlings.
Cool.
Very
cool.
We're at cons, we're at events. I know that when John and I were in London, we had a whole posse at the final first bash, where everybody else had their Garrison jerseys, and we strolled in with our hockey jerseys, and we stood out. It was
awesome.
pretty awesome. So keep an eye out for that. We will be posting more in the next day or so for that. And as we're going to be gearing up for May the 4th, we're still deciding on what we're going to be watching that night. I know that we're trying to figure that out, especially since the 25th of May, which is the actual 40th anniversary of Jedi, is on a Thursday as well. So we're maybe there's been talks of potentially doing Rogue One next week. We don't know. We're still trying to figure that out. Yes. So yeah. But anyway, thank you very much, Hal, once again for joining us tonight. We'll definitely have you involved with many other ideas. I know we have some talks for stuff in the very near future, but other stuff as well we're working on right now, which we're very, very excited about. So I know it's late for everybody else out there. So I want to say from the captain, Dave, Jeff, and Hal. This is Spencer saying, may the force be with you. And why is the rum always gone?